Beneath the whispers of history, in the shadow of ancient cathedrals and windswept battlefields, lies the story of a brotherhood unlike any other. The Knights Templar, warrior monks sworn to poverty, chastity, and obedience, rose from obscurity to command power and influence across Europe and the Holy Land. They guarded secrets said to be so profound, so dangerous, that kings feared them and the Church sought their destruction. But their legacy is shrouded in a fog of unanswered questions. What treasures did they spirit away during their final days? Were they keepers of sacred relics hidden beneath the Temple Mount in Palestine? And why, after centuries, do fragments of their symbols and rituals still surface in the most unlikely places? This is not just a tale of knights and crusades. It is a puzzle that stretches across time, challenging what we think we know about faith, power, and the very foundations of history. So sit back, open your mind, and let's step into the mystery of the Knights Templar. Secrets history still refuses to give up. The wind sweeps through the quiet ruins of an ancient fortress in the French countryside. Moss clings to the weathered stone, and the walls, once alive with the banners of the Knights Templar, stand silent, as though guarding a secret they have kept for more than 700 years. Somewhere beyond these crumbling ramparts, perhaps deep beneath the earth or scattered across distant lands, lies a mystery that has haunted historians, treasure hunters, and storytellers alike. The missing Templar treasure. The origins of this enigma reach back to the height of the Crusades. Founded in 1119, the Order of the Knights Templar was entrusted with protecting Christian pilgrims on their journey to the Holy Land. Their base of operations was established on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, territory now within modern-day Palestine, where they are believed to have excavated beneath the site of the ancient Jewish temple. For nearly a decade, they dug in secrecy, and though official records are silent on what they found, rumors swirled that they had uncovered relics of profound spiritual and material value. Some whispered of gold and silver from the Temple of Solomon. Others spoke of the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, or ancient scrolls containing forbidden knowledge. By the 13th century, the Templars had become one of the most powerful institutions in Europe. Their network of preceptories, stretching from England to Cyprus, was unmatched in wealth and influence. They served not only as warriors, but as financiers, establishing an early form of banking that allowed rulers and nobles to move vast sums of money safely across borders. It is said that kings themselves were indebted to the order. But power breeds enemies, and by the dawn of the 14th century, the Templars had many. The events that followed are well documented. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of every Templar within his realm. Accusations of heresy, blasphemy, and secret rituals were leveled against them, charges most historians now view as politically motivated. Yet, what is less certain is what became of the order's immense wealth. Chroniclers of the time report that when royal forces arrived at the Templar treasury in Paris, they found the vaults empty. How could such a fortune simply vanish? Some believe the treasure had been moved in the weeks leading up to the arrests. Theories suggest that wagons laden with gold and relics slipped away under the cover of darkness, making their way to safe havens beyond Philip's reach. One enduring legend claims that a fleet of Templar ships set sail from the French port of La Rochelle on the very night of the arrests, their cargo bound for Scotland, Portugal, or even the distant shores of North America. Archaeological evidence offers tantalizing hints but no certainty. In Scotland, whispers of Templar alliances with the exiled Robert the Bruce have fueled speculation that the treasure was hidden in remote Highland castles or buried deep beneath ancient chapels. In Portugal, where the order was reconstituted as the Knights of Christ, some see a continuation of Templar influence in the Age of Exploration, suggesting the treasure may have financed voyages to uncharted lands. Other theories look eastward. Could the Templar treasure have been concealed in the very place they first discovered it, beneath the stones of the Temple Mount in Palestine? Local traditions speak of tunnels and hidden chambers far beneath the ancient city, some of which remain unexplored to this day. Yet such claims are difficult to verify, locked away behind layers of political, religious, and archaeological complexity. Even more speculative ideas venture into the realm of the arcane. A few researchers propose that the treasure was never gold or jewels at all, but knowledge, texts or artifacts that challenged the accepted truths of medieval Christendom. If so, its disappearance would not merely be the loss of wealth, but the suppression of something far more dangerous to established powers. Could the Templars have safeguarded ancient engineering secrets, lost gospels, or astronomical data from civilizations long gone? The absence of proof has done nothing to still the questions. Historical records offer only fleeting glimpses of what might have happened. A letter from the early 14th century, preserved in the Vatican archives, mentions the transfer of certain goods to the care of the brethren overseas. Another obscure chronicle from Italy hints at a convoy of armed horsemen passing through the countryside in the weeks before the arrests, carrying sealed chests and guarded as though they bore the heart of the order itself. And yet, despite centuries of searching, no definitive trace of the treasure has ever been found. Treasure hunters have scoured the ruins of Templar strongholds, dived into coastal waters, and tunneled beneath chapels, each claiming to be on the verge of discovery, only to find nothing or to uncover items whose connection to the Templars remains uncertain. Perhaps the greatest lure of the missing Templar treasure is not the possibility of gold, but the gap it leaves in our understanding of history. The Templars were not merely soldiers or bankers. They were custodians of secrets, moving across continents at a time when knowledge itself could be as valuable as any coin. Whatever they possessed, they guarded it with their lives, and when the order fell, it slipped into the shadows, beyond the reach of kings and chroniclers. As we stand amid the ruins of their castles and walk the quiet halls of their chapels, the question lingers. Was the treasure destroyed, dispersed, or hidden away, waiting for the right moment, or the right person, to bring it back into the light? And if it were found, would it answer the riddles of the Templars, or only deepen them? The truth, it seems, remains as carefully guarded today as it was on that fateful October night. And perhaps that is the greatest mystery of all. Beneath the golden light of a late afternoon sun, the dome of the rock rises above the skyline of Jerusalem, its gleaming crown sheltering a place where history, legend, and faith converge. Beneath its foundation lies the Temple Mount, one of the most contested and sacred sites on earth. For centuries, it has been at the heart of religious devotion, political struggle, and enduring mystery. And for the Knights Templar, it was here, on this hallowed ground in what is now Palestine, that their story took on a deeper, more enigmatic dimension. When the Templars first arrived in the Holy Land in the early 12th century, they were granted quarters directly on the Temple Mount, in an area believed to encompass the ruins of King Solomon's temple. According to biblical accounts, it was within that temple, constructed nearly 1,000 years before the birth of Christ, that the Ark of the Covenant was housed. This sacred chest, said to contain the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, was more than a religious relic. In Jewish tradition, it was the embodiment of God's presence, a vessel of divine power so formidable that it could topple walls, strike armies, and bring death to the unworthy who dared to touch it. By the time the Templars established themselves on the site, the Ark had been missing for over 500 years. Its fate, according to scripture and later tradition, was uncertain. Some accounts suggest it was hidden before the Babylonian conquest in 586 BC. Others place its disappearance much earlier, during times of political turmoil in ancient Judah. Yet the idea that it might still be buried beneath the very stones on which the Templars lived was irresistible. Historical records confirm that for nearly a decade, the early Templars undertook extensive excavations beneath the Temple Mount. The reasons for this are never fully explained in contemporary documents. Officially, their role was to protect pilgrims and defend the Christian presence in the Holy Land. But the secrecy surrounding their activities, combined with later accounts from chroniclers and travelers, has led to speculation that they were searching for something of extraordinary value. Could it have been the Ark? Mainstream historians tend to approach such claims cautiously. No physical evidence has been found to prove the Templars recovered any ancient relic from the site. Yet hints persist. In the 14th century, a French chronicler recorded that the order had great and wondrous possessions in the East. In later centuries, rumors emerged of the Templars possessing sacred relics that could trace their origins back to the biblical era. Some researchers point to symbolic parallels in Templar architecture, certain geometric designs in their chapels, that resemble the dimensions described for the Ark in the Old Testament. The speculative theories take many forms. One suggests that the Templars discovered the Ark in an underground chamber and secretly transported it out of Palestine, perhaps first to their European strongholds and eventually to a hidden sanctuary far from inquisitive eyes. Another proposes that they did not remove the Ark at all, but learned of its exact location and concealed this knowledge, ensuring it could never be misused. More fringe interpretations weave the Ark into the broader tapestry of lost ancient technology. In these views, the Ark was not only a religious artifact, but also a device of immense and potentially dangerous power, something the Templars might have guarded not merely as a sacred object, but as a potent instrument that could alter the balance of power in the medieval world. And then there is the Ethiopian connection. In the city of Aksum, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church maintains a centuries-old tradition claiming the Ark was brought there long before the time of Christ, where it remains to this day under the guardianship of a single appointed monk. Some scholars have wondered if the Templars, through their extensive contacts and far-reaching influence, could have encountered knowledge of this claim, or even played a role in safeguarding the Ark's journey there. Still, for all the theories, the gaps in the historical record are vast. The Templars left few written testimonies, and those that survive rarely speak plainly about sacred relics. In the centuries after their fall, the absence of clarity became fertile ground for legend. The Ark of the Covenant connection grew from a quiet rumor into one of the most enduring stories surrounding the order. Perhaps because it speaks to something more profound than gold or jewels. It is about the possession of a mystery so ancient, so bound to the foundations of faith, that its discovery could shake the very core of religious belief. Archaeological exploration beneath the Temple Mount today is fraught with religious and political sensitivities, making direct investigation nearly impossible. And so the question remains suspended in time. Did the Templars find the Ark of the Covenant during their years on this sacred plateau, or is this only the echo of a legend born from the overlapping shadows of biblical history and medieval secrecy? As the sun sinks over Jerusalem and the light fades from the golden dome, the stones of the Temple Mount remain silent. If they hold the truth, it is buried deep, hidden beneath centuries of rubble, guarded by the weight of belief, and perhaps by the unbroken oaths of men who swore never to reveal what they had found. And so, the mystery endures. Was the Ark truly lost to history, or is it simply waiting, beyond the reach of time, for someone to bring it forth once again? A dimly lit chapel, tucked away in the rolling countryside of Europe, holds a simple, unassuming chalice. Its surface is weathered by centuries, the faint etchings on its rim worn smooth by countless hands. At first glance, it appears to be nothing more than a relic of medieval devotion. Yet to some, it is a vessel of unspeakable significance. to others. It is the ultimate prize in a quest that has spanned more than 1,000 years. The Holy Grail. The Grail's image is etched into the fabric of Western legend. In its most familiar form, it is the cup used by Jesus Christ during the Last Supper, later said to have caught his blood at the crucifixion. But the Grail is more than an object. It is an idea, a symbol of divine grace, eternal life, and the elusive search for truth. And among the many stories woven into the tapestry of Grail lore, few are as enduring as the belief that the Knights Templar may have been its secret guardians. The roots of this connection lie in the Templars' extraordinary presence in the Holy Land during the Crusades. Stationed on the Temple Mount in what is now Palestine, the order had direct access to sites venerated by Christians for their proximity to the life of Christ. Medieval chroniclers and later romanticized accounts suggest that during their years in the East, the Templars uncovered relics of unparalleled sacred value. Could the Holy Grail have been among them? Historically, the Grail does not appear in written form until the late 12th century in the works of Chrétien de Troyes and other poets of the Arthurian cycle. In these tales, the Grail is often shrouded in allegory, described not only as a cup, but sometimes as a stone, a dish, or a miraculous vessel whose meaning transcends physical form. These stories emerged at precisely the time when the Templars were at the height of their power and influence. Was this a mere coincidence, or were these literary depictions inspired by whispers of something the Order had actually found? Mainstream historians caution that the Grail legends are products of medieval imagination, blending Christian symbolism with older Celtic and pagan motifs. Yet the persistence of the Templar connection in popular memory is difficult to dismiss entirely. Some researchers point to the Order's unusual rituals, which outsiders often described as secretive and symbolic. Could these rites have contained references to a sacred vessel? The theories diverge from here. One interpretation suggests that the Grail was a physical object, a cup, perhaps of gold or silver, that the Templars discovered and kept hidden to protect it from political or religious exploitation. Another takes a more esoteric approach, proposing that the Grail was never an object at all, but rather a body of knowledge, a spiritual truth or mystical understanding preserved by the Templars for those deemed worthy. More fringe perspectives reach into the realm of the unconventional. Some suggest that the Grail was linked to the bloodline of Christ, a lineage allegedly preserved in secret, with the Templars acting as protectors of this living, holy vessel. In these narratives, the Grail is symbolic of life itself, its guardianship a task of both spiritual and political consequence. Still others weave the Grail into the broader history of relic movements across medieval Europe. There are claims that the cup now venerated in Valencia, Spain, as the Santo Cáliz, could be the original Grail, smuggled westward during the upheavals of the Crusades. Some believe the Templars played a role in its transport, perhaps safeguarding it in one of their fortified preceptories along the Pyrenees before it was delivered into the care of the Church. The absence of definitive evidence has done nothing to quiet the speculation. In Portugal, where the Templars re-emerged as the Order of Christ after their suppression, certain chapels bear architectural features and iconography that enthusiasts interpret as coded references to the Grail. In Scotland, legends claim the Grail was brought to Rosslyn Chapel, hidden beneath its ornate stonework until a time when humanity would be ready to receive its message. And then there are the whispers from beneath the Temple Mount itself. Archaeological exploration of the site is limited and politically sensitive, but tales persist that during their excavations there, the Templars uncovered relics from the earliest days of Christianity. Could the Grail have been among them? If so, did they take it to Europe, or is it still hidden beneath the ancient stones of Jerusalem, its presence known only to a select few? What makes the Holy Grail theory so compelling is its dual nature. It is both a tangible possibility and a profound metaphor. Whether a golden cup or a spiritual truth, the Grail represents the human desire to reach beyond the ordinary, to touch the divine. For the Templars, warrior monks sworn to God yet deeply enmeshed in the politics of their age, the guardianship of such a treasure would have been the ultimate expression of their mission. Yet history offers no conclusive answer. No document, no archaeological find, no unbroken chain of custody confirms that the Templars ever possessed the Grail. The silence of the record leaves room for the imagination, and perhaps that is why the story persists. The Grail, like the Templars themselves, lives at the intersection of history and myth, its truth concealed in shadows, its meaning shaped by the seeker's own beliefs. And so we are left to wonder if the Holy Grail truly existed, and if the Templars once held it. Where might it be now? Hidden in a chapel wall? Locked away in a vault beneath the earth? Or has it never been lost at all, waiting instead to be recognized by those who understand that the greatest treasures are not always made of gold? Beneath the vast stone platform of the Temple Mount, where sunlight glints off the golden dome and the air hums with centuries of devotion and conflict, lies a hidden world, dark, silent, and largely inaccessible. Narrow passages and vaulted chambers, some chiseled from the bedrock itself, stretch into the unknown beneath this sacred plateau in what is now Palestine. For the faithful, this is the site of Solomon's Temple, the heart of biblical history. For historians, it is an archaeological treasure layered with the remnants of civilizations. And for the Knights Templar, it may have been the key to one of history's most enduring mysteries. In 1119, when the newly formed Templar Order arrived in the Holy Land, they were granted quarters directly on the Temple Mount. Their base occupied the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which they believed stood upon the very foundations of Solomon's Temple. Medieval chroniclers record that for nearly a decade, the Templars engaged in activities below their headquarters, works that were neither military nor monastic, but secretive and unseen. Whether these were simple maintenance efforts, the securing of water channels, or something far more extraordinary remains an open question. The biblical account describes Solomon's Temple as a structure of immense grandeur, containing inner sanctuaries, storerooms, and possibly underground chambers for treasures and sacred relics. Could these vaults have survived the centuries? If so, might the Templars have found a way into them? Archaeological evidence beneath the Temple Mount is fragmentary, in part because direct excavation is extremely restricted due to religious and political sensitivities. What little is known comes from ancient texts, limited surveys, and occasional reports by early explorers who claim to have entered subterranean spaces through concealed entrances. Some 19th century accounts speak of vaulted halls, blocked stairways, and sealed passageways, features that suggest a far more extensive underground network than is officially acknowledged. Mainstream scholars tend to view the Templars' excavations as practical. They may have been searching for cisterns, strengthening foundations, or creating secure storage for documents and funds. Yet the secrecy that surrounded these operations, combined with the later legends of the Order's possession of sacred relics, has fueled speculation for centuries. Some theories suggest the Templars were following ancient maps or oral traditions, seeking treasures linked to biblical history. The Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, and other relics of deep spiritual significance all feature prominently in these narratives. In this version of events, the hidden vaults beneath the Temple Mount were not merely storage chambers. They were the final resting place of artifacts of immeasurable importance, deliberately concealed to protect them from conquest, theft, or destruction. Others take a more symbolic view, arguing that the Templars may have uncovered ancient scrolls or coded knowledge, records of lost engineering, sacred geometry, or theological secrets that challenged the religious orthodoxy of the medieval world. If so, it is possible that what they found was removed quietly, spirited away through the network of Templar strongholds across the Holy Land and Europe. There are even claims, on the fringe of accepted history, that some of these hidden vaults may still contain what the Templars left behind. Advocates of this idea point to the fact that many areas beneath the Temple Mount have never been fully explored with modern archaeological tools. Ground-penetrating radar surveys, where permitted, have revealed anomalies, dense, regular shapes that could be natural formations, or man-made structures long forgotten. The vaults themselves remain tantalizing in their mystery. How far do they extend? Are they connected to the massive cisterns beneath the platform, or do they lead to sealed chambers from the time of the First Temple? And if something was found there in the 12th century, was it hidden again, or carried far away to be kept in secrecy for generations? The Templar chapter of this story is particularly compelling because of the abruptness with which the order vanished from public life. In 1307, when King Philip IV of France moved to dismantle the Templars, the official inventories of their properties listed considerable assets, but nowhere was there mention of anything matching the legendary relics tied to the Temple Mount. If they had found something there, it left no trace in the records, unless that was the point. Today, the subterranean spaces beneath the Temple Mount are as inaccessible as they were in the Templars' time, perhaps more so. Religious authorities guard the site closely, and political realities make any excavation a matter of international tension. This inaccessibility, while frustrating to archaeologists, only deepens the aura of mystery. For centuries, the stones above have borne the footsteps of pilgrims, warriors, and rulers, while beneath them, the darkness may still hold whatever truths the Templars once sought or found. The question lingers in the silence of those unseen halls. Did the Knights Templar uncover something beneath the Temple Mount that altered their destiny, shaping the legends that followed them into history? Or are these hidden vaults nothing more than empty chambers, their significance built not of relics, but of the human desire to believe that the past still holds undiscovered wonders? Perhaps the answer lies deep underground, waiting for the moment when light will once again touch the stones that have not been seen for 1,000 years. Until then, the mystery remains sealed, locked away in the shadows beneath one of the most sacred and contested places on Earth. Along the windswept Atlantic coast of western France, the tide rolls in against the ancient harbor of La Rochelle. Fishing boats sway gently at their moorings, their hulls creaking in the briny air. But on certain nights, when the mist clings low to the water, locals speak of another fleet, a ghostly armada that slipped away into the darkness more than 7 centuries ago and was never seen again. This is the mystery of the vanished Templar fleet. On the morning of Friday, October 13th, 1307, the Knights Templar awoke to catastrophe. Across France, King Philip IV's orders were executed with precision. Templar strongholds were seized, their members arrested, and their vast holdings confiscated. The charges, heresy, blasphemy, and corruption, were as sensational as they were likely contrived. But while many of the order's leaders were taken by surprise, what happened to their maritime assets remains an open question. La Rochelle was one of the Templars' most important ports, a hub for transporting goods, troops, and possibly treasure between Europe and the Holy Land. According to some accounts, when royal forces arrived to take control of the harbor, they found the fleet had already vanished. No official records detail where the ships went or even how many there were. Some chroniclers mention a small squadron. Others speak of an entire armada. What is certain is that the fleet was not accounted for among the assets seized by the French crown. It had simply disappeared. Mainstream explanations tend toward the pragmatic. Perhaps the ships were relocated in the days or weeks before the arrests, moved to safer waters under the control of Templar allies in Portugal or England. Some historians suggest the vessels could have been absorbed quietly into the merchant fleets of sympathetic rulers, their ownership disguised to avoid confiscation. In this view, the fleet's disappearance was less a vanishing act and more a strategic relocation to protect valuable assets. But the absence of concrete evidence has allowed more speculative theories to flourish. One popular idea is that the Templars used the fleet to transport their most precious possessions, wealth in gold, sacred relics, or secret documents, out of France before the king's agents could seize them. The destination most often suggested is Scotland, where Robert the Bruce, excommunicated by the Pope, was beyond the reach of papal authority. Some even claim that Templar knights fought alongside Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, their survival aided by the treasure they brought with them. Other theories push further still, linking the vanished fleet to the distant shores of the New World. Advocates of this idea point to scattered evidence, pre-Columbian maps with unusual markings, mysterious stone carvings, and local legends among indigenous peoples that seem to hint at contact with Europeans before Columbus. Could the Templars have sailed west across the Atlantic decades or even centuries before such voyages became recorded history? Then there are those who look southward, suggesting the fleet may have reached the Mediterranean and hidden in the fortified ports of Cyprus or the island of Majorca. These locations, still within the sphere of Templar influence in the early 14th century, could have served as waypoints for dispersing the fleet and its cargo across the known world. The most romantic, and perhaps the most enduring, of these theories ties the fleet's disappearance to the broader legend of the Templar treasure. If the Order had indeed recovered something of great spiritual or historical significance, perhaps from beneath the Temple Mount in Palestine, then spiriting it away by sea would have been the most secure means of ensuring its survival. In this telling, the fleet becomes not merely a means of escape, but the final safeguard for the Order's greatest secret. A handful of tantalizing clues have kept the mystery alive. In the 19th century, divers exploring the harbor at La Rochelle reported finding ancient stone moorings far out to sea, as if for large ships that anchored beyond the reach of shore-based observers. In Scotland, oral traditions speak of foreign ships landing on remote coasts in the early 14th century, and in Portugal, the rapid rise of the Order of Christ, widely considered the Templars' successor, has fueled speculation that it inherited not only Templar members, but also their maritime resources. Yet none of these fragments provides definitive proof. The sea, as always, guards its secrets well. Ships lost to time leave little trace, and the absence of surviving records means the fate of the Templar fleet exists in a space between fact and legend. Was it a calculated escape to preserve the Order's assets? A daring mission to relocate sacred relics beyond the reach of Europe's kings and popes? Or the first chapter in a hidden history of transoceanic voyages long before the age of exploration? As the tide pulls back from La Rochelle's stone quays, the water glints under the fading light, and the mind turns to those ships that slipped silently into the night so many centuries ago. Somewhere, perhaps in the archives of forgotten monasteries, in the silt of a remote harbor, or in the carved memory of an ancient coastal people, the truth of the Templar fleet's fate may yet be waiting. But for now it remains just beyond reach, adrift on the edge of history, lost in the mists between what we know and what we can only imagine. Off the coast of Nova Scotia, shrouded in fog and battered by the relentless Atlantic winds, lies a small, unassuming island. Its shoreline is rocky, its forest dense, and its presence almost forgettable, were it not for a mystery that has endured for more than 2 centuries. Oak Island, as it is known, holds a secret buried deep beneath its soil, a secret that has drawn fortune seekers, scholars, and dreamers from around the world. And in the labyrinth of theories surrounding its hidden treasure, one name surfaces again and again: the Knights Templar. The story begins in 1795, when a young man named Daniel McGinnis discovered a circular depression in the earth while exploring the island. Curious, he and 2 friends began digging, soon uncovering a layer of flagstones and, beneath them, layers of oak timbers placed at regular intervals. With each 10 feet they descended, they found another layer, oak beams, clay, and coconut fiber not native to the area. It was a construction that seemed deliberate, sophisticated, and centuries old. As the excavation continued over the years, strange features emerged. At approximately 90 feet deep, an inscribed stone was reportedly found, bearing a cryptic message that, when translated by some, allegedly read, "40 feet below, 2 million pounds lie buried." But before anyone could reach that depth, seawater flooded the shaft through a system of flood tunnels, ingenious, booby trap-like channels designed to keep intruders from reaching whatever lay at the bottom. From that moment on, Oak Island became a puzzle of almost impossible complexity. Dozens of attempts to reach the bottom failed. Shafts collapsed, workers were injured, and several lives were lost. The engineering behind the flood system baffled even 19th century engineers. Who could have built such an elaborate system, and why? Enter the Templar theory. Some historians and treasure hunters believe that the Oak Island money pit is more than a simple stash of wealth. It could be the final hiding place of the legendary Templar treasure. The connection stems from the events of 1307, when the Templars were arrested across France, and their vast riches vanished without a trace. The theory suggests that part of this treasure, perhaps even sacred relics recovered from beneath the Temple Mount in Palestine, was transported by the Order's fleet. From there, the narrative imagines a daring voyage across the Atlantic, long before Columbus, ending on the remote shores of Nova Scotia. Supporters of this theory point to several intriguing coincidences. First, the island lies near old shipping routes once used by early European fishermen and explorers, making it accessible to a skilled maritime order like the Templars. Second, carvings and symbols found on or near the island resemble those associated with the Templars, including a cross pate and other geometric markings. And third, the flood tunnel engineering seems far more advanced than what local settlers or even pirates of the 17th century would likely have constructed. Skeptics offer other explanations. The structure could be the work of Spanish sailors, pirates, or even 18th century engineers attempting to hide loot or important documents. Some suggest it might have been an elaborate hoax, though the scale and sophistication of the construction make this difficult to accept. Geological features, natural sinkholes and water channels, could explain the flooding, though the symmetry and repeated layering of materials suggest intentional design. Adding another layer of intrigue, coconut fiber, found deep within the shaft, has been radiocarbon dated to centuries before McGinnis's discovery, and its presence is baffling. Coconut trees do not grow in Nova Scotia, meaning the material had to be brought from tropical regions, perhaps as packing material for something precious. Over the decades, countless expeditions have dug, drilled, and surveyed Oak Island, each uncovering tantalizing fragments, links of chain, parchment-like materials, wooden structures far below the surface. None of these finds has definitively solved the mystery, but they have kept hope alive that something of immense value, whether material, historical, or spiritual, remains buried. If the Templar connection is true, it raises fascinating questions. Could the treasure be more than gold? Could it be ancient manuscripts, lost gospels, or relics like the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail, spirited away from Europe to safeguard them from destruction? And if so, what knowledge might they contain? Knowledge that could alter our understanding of history. Yet the island guards its secrets stubbornly. Every technological advance, from sonar imaging to ground-penetrating radar, has provided only partial answers. Subsurface anomalies appear, then vanish under the shifting mud and water. Wooden supports hint at chambers just beyond reach, only for excavations to collapse before they can be explored. Standing on the island today, the trees swaying under a cold Atlantic wind, one can feel the weight of the centuries pressing in. The ground beneath your feet could be covering the final chapter of a story that began on the battlefields of the Crusades, wound through the streets of medieval Europe, and ended on this quiet, fog-draped shore. But perhaps the most enduring question is not whether the Templars left something here, but why they would choose a place so remote, so difficult to access, and so deliberately protected. Was it simply a secure vault for wealth? Or was it a vault for something far more dangerous or transformative than gold? The truth remains buried, somewhere deep in the labyrinth of earth, timber, and seawater. And until the final layer is reached, if it ever is, the Oak Island mystery will remain one of the most compelling and elusive chapters in the long shadow of the Knights Templar. In a climate-controlled chamber in Turin, Italy, lies a linen cloth over 14 feet long and just over 3 feet wide. At first glance, it is unremarkable, aged, faintly yellowed, and delicately woven. But when seen in its entirety, a haunting image emerges. The front and back of a man's body, imprinted in a ghostly negative, bearing wounds consistent with crucifixion. This is the Shroud of Turin, one of the most studied, debated, and venerated relics in the Christian world. For centuries, the shroud has been associated with the burial of Jesus Christ. Its image shows not only the outline of a bearded man, but also the marks of scourging, a pierced side, and puncture wounds in the wrists and feet. Whether one views it as a sacred relic or an extraordinary medieval artifact, its presence is undeniably powerful, drawing pilgrims, scientists, and skeptics alike. The earliest confirmed historical appearance of the shroud dates to the mid-14th century, when it was displayed in the small French town of Liry. Its sudden emergence has puzzled historians. Where had it been for the preceding 1,300 years? And how had it survived the turbulent centuries between the crucifixion and its first public showing? Here, the Knights Templar enter the story. Some researchers believe the shroud could have been in the possession of the Templars during the height of their power. The theory draws on both circumstantial evidence and tantalizing fragments of historical record. In 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, Constantinople was sacked by Western Crusaders. Among the treasures looted from the Byzantine capital was a cloth known to some chroniclers as the Image of Edessa, or Mandylion, a revered relic bearing the miraculous image of Christ's face. Some accounts suggest this cloth was later cut or altered, perhaps to reveal the full body image now seen on the Shroud of Turin. Could the Templars, active in the Crusades and possessing vast networks across Europe and the Holy Land, have been entrusted with its safekeeping? The theory gains intrigue from the Templars' secretive practices. At their trials in the early 14th century, some members testified, under duress, about worshipping a mysterious bearded head or image. The descriptions are inconsistent, but some scholars have suggested they might refer to a folded form of the shroud, showing only the head of the man imprinted on the cloth. If the Templars did possess the shroud, how did it survive the order's sudden downfall in 1307? Supporters of the theory propose that it was quietly transferred to sympathetic allies or hidden in remote strongholds until it resurfaced in Liry decades later, under the guardianship of Geoffroy de Charny, a knight whose family connections hint at possible ties to former Templars. Mainstream historians caution that direct evidence for this chain of custody is lacking. The gap between the known possession of the Mandylion in Constantinople and the shroud's appearance in France remains unproven. Carbon dating, performed in 1988, suggested the cloth originated in the Middle Ages, between 1260 and 1390, seemingly too late to be the burial shroud of Christ. Yet subsequent studies have challenged these results, arguing that the tested sample may have been from a medieval repair rather than the original fabric. Other scientific investigations have examined pollen grains, textile weaving patterns, and chemical residues, some of which point toward origins in the Middle East and possible exposure to ancient burial practices. The image itself adds another layer of mystery. Despite decades of study, no one has conclusively determined how it was made. It is not painted. The fibers bear no traces of pigments in the usual sense. The coloration resides only on the surface of the linen's outermost fibers, suggesting a process unlike any known medieval art technique. Some theories point to natural chemical reactions from a decomposing body. Others propose a burst of radiant energy. A few, more speculative still, suggest an as-yet unknown technology, lost to history. If the shroud was indeed in the Templars' care, what would that mean for our understanding of the Order's mission and beliefs? Were they safeguarding it purely as a Christian relic, or did they view it as something more? A key to a deeper, perhaps hidden understanding of the faith they served. The possibility intertwines with the broader narrative of the Templars' alleged possession of sacred treasures recovered from beneath the Temple Mount in Palestine. If they had access to such relics, the shroud might have been one among several, protected not only from theft but from misuse or destruction. In this light, its reappearance in France could be seen not as a random event, but as a carefully timed revelation, one that ensured the cloth's survival through centuries of political and religious upheaval. Standing before the shroud today, separated by glass and centuries, one cannot help but wonder, is this the actual burial cloth of Jesus of Nazareth, preserved against all odds by one of history's most enigmatic orders? Or is it the work of a medieval artisan whose skill and purpose remain unknown? The faint, almost ethereal image resists certainty. It does not proclaim its origin, nor does it surrender its secrets easily. Like so much of the Knights Templar legacy, it exists in that liminal space where history and mystery meet, a place where the facts we know are outnumbered by the questions we cannot yet answer. And so, the shroud waits, quiet, unchanging, as the world continues to search for the truth it may or may not hold. In the rolling highlands of Scotland, where the mist clings low to the heather and the wind carries whispers across ancient stone, there stands a scattering of medieval ruins. Some are the remnants of castles, others of chapels weathered by centuries of rain and frost. Among them, Rosslyn Chapel, richly carved with symbols that seem to defy simple explanation, has long been at the heart of one of the most enduring legends surrounding the Knights Templar. The possibility that, after their dramatic fall in 1307, some of the Order's surviving members escaped here, carrying with them their secrets, their wealth, and perhaps their most precious treasures. The historical backdrop is well documented. When King Philip IV of France moved against the Templars, arresting them en masse and seizing their assets, it marked the beginning of the Order's end across much of Europe. Yet Scotland, at the time, stood in defiance of papal authority. Robert the Bruce, excommunicated for killing a rival in a church, was locked in a fierce struggle for independence against England. The papal decrees that doomed the Templars elsewhere held little sway here. It is within this political climate that the escape theory takes root. According to some accounts, a contingent of Templar knights, possibly aided by the disappearance of their fleet from the port of La Rochelle, sailed northward to Scotland. Whether they came directly across the North Sea or first sought refuge in other ports before making the final leg, the idea remains the same. Scotland was a land where they could vanish into the mists and find allies in a king who had every reason to welcome skilled warriors with deep resources. Mainstream historians are cautious. There is no surviving document from the early 14th century that explicitly records the arrival of Templars in Scotland. Yet circumstantial hints persist. Scottish chronicles from the period speak of foreign knights fighting alongside Robert the Bruce at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, a decisive victory against the English. In some versions of the story, these warriors are described as mysterious horsemen who appeared on the battlefield at a crucial moment, their white mantles emblazoned with a red cross. The connection between the Templars and Scottish Freemasonry further complicates the picture. Centuries later, Masonic traditions in Scotland would claim descent from the Templars, weaving a lineage that linked the two orders through shared symbols and supposed initiatory rites. Rosslyn Chapel, constructed in the 15th century by the Sinclair family, long associated with both Scottish nobility and esoteric traditions, features carvings that some interpret as Templar in origin, from depictions of the Knight's Cross to patterns thought to encode ancient knowledge. Could this be the architectural echo of a much older alliance? From here, the theories branch into more speculative territory. One suggests that the Templars not only found refuge in Scotland, but also safeguarded treasures brought from the Holy Land, possibly relics from beneath the Temple Mount in Palestine. These items, whether gold, manuscripts, or sacred artifacts, may have been hidden in remote strongholds or buried in places known only to a select few. Another theory proposes that the Templars' military expertise was quietly integrated into Robert the Bruce's forces, helping secure Scottish independence in ways that official histories chose not to record. There is also the enduring suggestion that the Templars in Scotland became a hidden order, their presence masked by other identities while they preserved their rituals, symbols, and perhaps their original mission. In this telling, the fall of the order in 1307 was not an end, but a transformation, one that allowed them to survive in plain sight. Skeptics argue that such stories are the product of romanticized history, layered with centuries of legend. They point out that the appearance of unidentified knights on a medieval battlefield was not unusual, and that many of the symbols claimed as Templar could have broader Christian or chivalric origins. The connections to Freemasonry, they say, were more likely constructed in later centuries to lend the fraternity an air of ancient mystique. Yet the persistence of the Scottish refuge narrative speaks to its enduring allure. The absence of direct records may be as telling as their presence, especially for an order skilled in secrecy. If the Templars did reach Scotland, they would have had every reason to erase traces of their arrival, blending into the complex web of alliances and feuds that defined the medieval Highlands. Even now, Rosslyn Chapel continues to draw those searching for physical proof. Its intricate carvings, angels, knights, vines, and cryptic geometric designs are studied for hidden messages. The chapel's sealed crypt, rumored to contain the remains of knights or even long-lost relics, remains inaccessible to the public. Archaeological surveys have revealed anomalies beneath its foundations, though these remain unexplored, locked away by the weight of heritage protection laws and the reluctance to disturb a sacred site. So we are left with the tantalizing possibility: did the Templars truly escape to Scotland, carrying with them the last remnants of their order's power? Were they silent allies in Bruce's cause, or custodians of a treasure whose value lay not in gold, but in the preservation of knowledge? The Scottish mists keep their secrets well, and somewhere, perhaps in a hidden vault beneath centuries of stone, or in the recesses of a family's guarded oral history, the truth of the Templar escape may still be waiting, untouched, undiscovered, and silent. High in the French Pyrenees, where jagged peaks cut into the clouds and the wind whistles through narrow passes, a solitary fortress clings to the summit of a steep limestone spur. Its walls, weathered and broken, overlook a sweeping valley that seems impossibly far below. This is Montségur, a place of haunting beauty and deep historical resonance. Today, it is silent but for the rustle of mountain grasses. Yet in the 13th century, it was the final stronghold of a persecuted faith, the site of a siege that ended in fire, and, according to some, one of the last chapters in a mystery that may link it to the Knights Templar. Historically, Montségur was a fortress of the Cathars, a Christian sect whose beliefs diverged sharply from the Catholic Church. The Cathars rejected the Church's wealth, hierarchy, and some of its core doctrines, advocating instead for a purer, more ascetic form of Christianity. To the Church, such beliefs were heresy. In 1244, after a grueling 10-month siege by French royal forces and inquisitorial armies, Montségur fell. Over 200 Cathars who refused to renounce their faith were burned alive at the base of the mountain. The event marked the brutal end of Cathar resistance in the Languedoc. Yet, it is the days just before the fall that fuel centuries of speculation. According to surviving accounts, a small group of defenders descended the steep slopes under cover of darkness, carrying with them a mysterious object or treasure entrusted to them by the Cathar leadership. What they carried and where they took it has never been discovered. This is where the connection to the Knights Templar begins to surface. Some historians have pointed out the geographical and cultural overlap between the Cathar lands and Templar holdings in southern France. Both groups operated in the region during the same period. Both held beliefs and practices that set them apart from mainstream medieval society, and both ultimately suffered destruction at the hands of church and crown. Could the fleeing Cathars have been aided by sympathetic Templars? Mainstream historical consensus maintains that the Cathars and Templars were distinct groups with different origins and purposes. The Cathars were a religious movement, the Templars a military monastic order, yet the absence of clear records leaves space for more speculative ideas to take root. Some propose that the treasure taken from Montségur was not material wealth at all, but sacred knowledge or relics, perhaps connected to biblical artifacts, ancient manuscripts, or even the Holy Grail itself. In this telling, Montségur becomes more than a fortress. It is the guardian of a secret that passed from one persecuted group to another, carried through hidden alliances into the shadows of history. If the Templars received such a treasure, they may have incorporated it into their own vast network of strongholds, protecting it until their suppression decades later in 1307. Others suggest the treasure was hidden in the mountains themselves, buried in caves or deep fissures accessible only to those who knew the land intimately. The Pyrenees are riddled with caverns, some of which have been used for shelter and storage for millennia. Archaeological surveys have revealed ancient artifacts in the region, though none that conclusively tie to Montségur's last defenders. Even without physical evidence, the story has endured. Part of its staying power comes from the almost mythic image of Montségur itself, a fortress in the sky, standing against overwhelming odds, its defenders bound by faith and secrecy. The idea that something precious, whether gold, relics, or knowledge, slipped away into the night before the flames consumed the rest, lends the site an almost cinematic quality. The Templar connection gains further intrigue from patterns in later legends. In some versions of the Grail romances written during or shortly after the Cathar period, the Grail is hidden in a castle in the mountains, guarded by a secretive order of knights. While these are works of literature, their imagery echoes the real-world geography and circumstances of Montségur, raising the question, did these stories draw from whispered truths known to their authors? Skeptics counter that such connections are tenuous at best, the product of hindsight and the romanticizing of medieval history. The lack of direct documentation linking the Templars to the Cathars or to any treasure taken from Montségur is a significant obstacle. They argue that the treasure could simply have been the Cathar archives, portable wealth, or even food supplies spirited away in a desperate bid for survival. Still, the mystery persists. Montségur has been the subject of countless expeditions, both amateur and professional. Some have focused on the fortress ruins, others on the surrounding mountainsides. While small finds, coins, fragments of pottery, remnants of weapons have been recovered, nothing has emerged that explains what was carried away in those final nights before the siege ended. Standing on the summit today, surrounded by the endless sweep of peaks and valleys, it is easy to imagine how something could vanish here, hidden away in a place so remote and rugged that it could remain untouched for centuries. And it is equally easy to imagine that, if the Templars were indeed involved, they would have had both the means and the motivation to ensure that whatever they safeguarded never fell into the hands of their enemies. Did the last Cathars of Montségur entrust their greatest secret to the Knights Templar, intertwining their fates in a shared struggle against the powers that sought to destroy them? Or is the story simply a blend of coincidence and legend, shaped over time into a tale that fits our desire for hidden connections? The winds that sweep the heights of Montségur carry no answers. But somewhere in the folds of these mountains, or in the unexamined recesses of medieval archives, the truth may still be waiting, silent and unseen. The eastern coast of Newfoundland is a place where the Atlantic meets the land with relentless force. Rugged cliffs rise above the waves, and dense forests press against rocky shores. The air is sharp with salt, and in the quiet between gusts of wind, the sea seems to whisper secrets from far across the ocean. It is here, among the coves and inlets of Canada's easternmost province, that some believe the Knights Templar may have made landfall centuries before Columbus ever set sail. The theory begins with the mystery of the Templar fleet's disappearance in 1307. On the night before King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of the entire order, the ship stationed at La Rochelle reportedly slipped away under cover of darkness, vanishing into history. Where they went has never been proven. Some accounts place them in Scotland, others in Portugal. But a more speculative thread suggests they continued westward, across the uncharted Atlantic, and arrived on the shores of what would later become known as Newfoundland. On the surface, it seems improbable. The technology of the early 14th century was far removed from the navigational precision of later explorers. Yet the Norse had reached Newfoundland's Lands aux Meadows nearly 300 years earlier, proving that transatlantic voyages were not only possible, but achievable with the seafaring skills of the time. Could the Templars, wealthy, resourceful, and skilled in navigation, have followed a similar course? Supporters of the Newfoundland landing theory point to a handful of tantalizing clues. In scattered locations along Newfoundland's coastline, unusual stone markings and carvings have been reported, some resembling the cross pate, the distinctive emblem of the Templars. While such symbols are not exclusive to the order, their presence in a land supposedly unknown to Europeans in the 14th century raises questions. There are also oral traditions among some coastal communities, stories of foreign ships arriving in ancient times, crewed by men who traded peacefully with locals before vanishing again. While these tales cannot be dated with precision, their imagery sometimes aligns with descriptions of medieval European vessels. One of the most intriguing links is the legend of the Templars safeguarding a treasure, whether gold, sacred relics, or documents of immense significance, that needed to be hidden far from the reach of the Church and European monarchs. If they were seeking a place of ultimate security, the remote and sparsely inhabited coasts of Newfoundland would have offered an ideal refuge. From there, theories branch into several possibilities. Perhaps the Templars established a temporary settlement, leaving behind hidden caches that remain undiscovered. Or perhaps Newfoundland was only a stop on a longer voyage, the fleet continuing further south to the shores of Nova Scotia, or even to the Caribbean, where some believe traces of medieval European presence can be found. Mainstream historians remain cautious, noting that hard evidence for a Templar presence in Newfoundland is lacking. The carvings could be the work of later settlers, and oral traditions can evolve significantly over centuries. Yet, the absence of definitive proof has not deterred researchers, and the theory remains part of the broader conversation about pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. More speculative versions of the theory intertwine with the stories of Oak Island in Nova Scotia, where some believe the Templar treasure was ultimately buried. In this scenario, Newfoundland served as the first landing point, a gateway to the hidden inlets and waterways of Atlantic Canada, from which the Order could move inland to conceal their most valuable possessions. Other interpretations lean toward symbolic or spiritual motives. The Templars, known for their interest in sacred geography, may have been seeking not just a safe haven but a place of significance, somewhere that aligned with their esoteric beliefs about the world's hidden harmonies. In this view, Newfoundland's position on the edge of the known world might have held special meaning, a threshold between the familiar and the uncharted. Standing on the shore today, watching the waves roll in from the open ocean, it is easy to see how such a voyage could fade into legend. The North Atlantic is both a barrier and a pathway, its dangers immense, its rewards profound. For the Templars, fleeing annihilation in Europe, the decision to push westward into its vastness might have seemed less a gamble than a necessity. Did they truly reach Newfoundland? If so, what did they bring with them? And what, if anything, did they leave behind? Are the answers hidden in coastal caves, beneath layers of forest soil, or in submerged harbors now claimed by the sea? Or is the Newfoundland landing theory simply a reflection of our fascination with the Templars' ability to appear and disappear at the edges of recorded history? The ocean keeps its counsel, the wind carrying only hints of what may have happened here long ago. And as the waves crash against the rocks, one can't help but wonder, somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, did the Templar fleet find not only refuge, but a new world? In the soft light of dawn, the streets of Rennes-le-Château in southern France are quiet. Stone houses cling to the hillside, overlooking rolling fields and distant mountains that fade into the mist. This tiny village has become the unlikely center of one of the most controversial theories in modern historical speculation, a theory that, if true, could redefine the foundations of Christianity. It is the so-called Jesus Bloodline theory, a mystery that some believe connects directly to the Knights Templar. At the heart of the idea is a provocative question. Did Jesus of Nazareth leave behind not only a spiritual legacy, but a physical one? A direct bloodline that survived through the centuries? The theory suggests that after the crucifixion, Jesus' wife, often identified as Mary Magdalene, fled the Holy Land, carrying with her his child. In this narrative, she found refuge in the south of France, where her descendants intermarried with local nobility, giving rise to a hidden royal lineage. While mainstream historians regard these claims as speculative and unsupported by primary sources, they remain compelling to many, in part because of the way they weave together fragments of legend, medieval records, and religious symbolism. In the context of the Templars, the theory takes on a more secretive dimension. Some researchers argue that during their years stationed on the Temple Mount in Palestine, the Templars discovered documents or relics that revealed the existence of this bloodline, knowledge that could undermine the Church's authority if it were made public. The official history of the Templars offers no confirmation of such discoveries. Yet their rapid rise to wealth and influence in the 12th and 13th centuries, coupled with their unusual independence from local bishops, has prompted questions. Were they simply skilled administrators and warriors, or were they protecting a deeper secret, one that granted them leverage over both kings and popes? Supporters of the Jesus bloodline theory point to the Order's enigmatic symbols and rituals, some of which appear to elevate Mary Magdalene in ways that diverge from orthodox medieval Christianity. In certain regions of France where Templar activity was strong, churches and chapels dedicated to her are unusually prominent. Could this emphasis reflect a reverence born of hidden knowledge about her role in Christian history? The theory's modern popularity was fueled in the late 20th century by books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which argued for a link between the Templars, the Priory of Sion, and the preservation of a sacred bloodline. In this telling, the Templars were not merely guardians of relics like the Holy Grail, but custodians of living descendants, a lineage that needed to be shielded from political and religious enemies. The Grail itself, in this interpretation, becomes a metaphor, not a chalice, but the royal blood, sang Real, of Christ's family. From a mainstream historical perspective, there are simpler explanations for the Templars' symbols and their reverence for certain saints. Mary Magdalene's veneration in southern France, for example, can be attributed to long-standing local legends and devotional traditions that predate the Templars. Yet the convergence of these traditions with areas of Templar influence continues to fuel speculation. One of the more intriguing threads in this narrative involves the village of Rennes-le-Château. In the late 19th century, its parish priest, Bérenger Saunière, became inexplicably wealthy after allegedly discovering something hidden in his church. While no evidence ties his fortune directly to the Templars, some theorists believe he stumbled upon clues to the same secret they had once guarded. Among the wilder claims is the suggestion that coded messages in the church's artwork point to the survival of the bloodline, and that the priest's sudden wealth was the result of either blackmail or the sale of this knowledge. Skeptics counter that such connections are tenuous at best, built on coincidences and retrofitted interpretations of art and architecture. Yet even they acknowledge that the Templars' destruction in 1307 left many unanswered questions about what, if anything, the order may have hidden away before its fall. If the Jesus bloodline theory is pure invention, it is remarkably persistent, its details evolving over centuries, yet always circling back to the idea of a secret powerful enough to destabilize the medieval world. The more speculative versions of the theory stretch even further. Some suggest that the bloodline survived not only through European nobility, but that its descendants continue to live in secrecy today, their identities known only to a select few. In this view, the Templars were part of an unbroken chain of guardians stretching from the early church to the present, each generation sworn to protect the truth until the time was right to reveal it. Others believe that the bloodline was not merely a matter of heritage, but of spiritual authority, that the rightful heirs of Jesus would embody a legitimacy capable of challenging the Church's claim as the sole interpreter of Christian teaching. If the Templars possessed proof of such a lineage, whether in the form of genealogical records, relics, or other evidence, it might explain both their meteoric rise and the ferocity with which they were ultimately destroyed. Still, no document, no archaeological find, and no uncontested piece of evidence has ever confirmed the existence of such a bloodline. The gaps in the historical record, especially surrounding the Templars' activities in the Holy Land, leave space for conjecture, but they do not offer certainty. And perhaps that is why the Jesus bloodline theory remains so enduring. It exists in the space between history and legend, where the absence of proof becomes an invitation to imagine. Standing in the quiet of Rennes-le-Château, with the wind carrying the scent of pine and the distant toll of a church bell, the question lingers. If the Templars did guard such a secret, was it hidden away forever, or is it still waiting, somewhere in the shadows of history to be found? In the dim light of a lodge room, a square and compass rest upon a polished wooden altar. Around the walls, intricate carvings depict ancient symbols, pillars, stars, and winding staircases, each layered with meaning that is both familiar and obscure. The air is heavy with the scent of candle wax and history, and somewhere in these quiet spaces lies one of the most persistent and debated ideas in esoteric tradition, the possible link between the medieval Knights Templar and the modern fraternity of Freemasons. At first glance, the connection appears to be one of symbolism. The Templars, a military monastic order founded in the early 12th century, carried their distinctive red cross on a white mantle. The Freemasons, emerging publicly in the early 18th century, are known for their use of geometry, allegory, and architectural motifs. Yet, over time, a web of shared imagery, ritual echoes, and overlapping legends has suggested to some that the Masons are not merely inspired by the Templars, but are their spiritual and perhaps direct descendants. Historically, the Templar order was disbanded in 1312 by Pope Clement V under pressure from King Philip IV of France. Many knights were imprisoned, executed, or absorbed into other military and religious orders, but the fate of the surviving members is less certain. Some were said to have fled to regions beyond papal control, including Scotland, where Robert the Bruce, excommunicated at the time, would have had little reason to hand them over to church authorities. Here, the story begins to intertwine with the speculative roots of the Freemason connection. Masonic tradition holds that its symbolic lineage reaches back to the builders of King Solomon's Temple in ancient Jerusalem. The Templars, during their years stationed on the Temple Mount in Palestine, were believed to have excavated beneath its foundations, possibly uncovering artifacts, documents, or knowledge tied to that very heritage. Could the Templars have carried this legacy northward, embedding it into a new, secretive fraternity that emerged in later centuries? Mainstream historians are cautious. While Freemasonry as an organized movement appears in documented form in the early modern period, there is no conclusive evidence linking it directly to the Templars. The earliest Masonic lodges were largely composed of stonemasons and craftsmen, whose trade guilds evolved into speculative lodges centered on moral philosophy and symbolic teaching. Yet by the mid-18th century, certain branches of Masonry, particularly the Scottish Rite and York Rite, had adopted Templar titles, imagery, and degrees. Whether this was an actual inheritance or an inspired adoption remains an open question. Some researchers point to the striking parallels between Templar and Masonic initiation rituals, both of which involve oaths of secrecy, symbolic trials, and a strong emphasis on moral discipline. The narrative of betrayal and loss, central to Templar history, finds echoes in Masonic allegories about destruction, concealment, and eventual restoration. In both traditions, the initiate is guided toward hidden truths through symbolic acts rather than direct instruction. The Scottish connection is particularly compelling to proponents of the theory. Following the suppression of the Templars, Scotland's relative isolation from papal enforcement may have provided a safe haven for exiled knights. In this telling, the Templars integrated into local society, passing their traditions into operative stonemason guilds that later transformed into speculative Freemasonry. The construction of Rosslyn Chapel in the 15th century is often cited as a physical link, a building whose ornate carvings include motifs associated with both Templar and Masonic symbolism. While Rosslyn was built more than a century after the Templars' fall, its Sinclair patrons were connected to both the Scottish nobility and Masonic lore, making it a focal point for those seeking a tangible bridge between the two worlds. There are also more speculative elements to the theory. Some claim that the Templars possessed advanced knowledge of sacred geometry and architectural design, possibly inherited from their time in the Holy Land. If such knowledge survived, it may have been preserved within Masonic traditions, encoded in symbols and ritual language accessible only to those initiated into the craft. Others suggest the connection was less about knowledge and more about mission, that the Masons inherited the Templars' role as protectors of certain truths, whether theological, historical, or esoteric. Skeptics counter that the adoption of Templar imagery by Freemasonry in the 18th century was part of a broader trend of romanticizing the medieval past. At the time, orders and societies across Europe were invoking chivalric symbols to lend themselves an air of antiquity and nobility. The Templars, with their aura of mystery, were an ideal choice. In this view, the Masonic Templar degrees are less a continuation of an ancient order and more an homage, powerful in symbolism, but without direct lineage. And yet, the persistence of the narrative suggests it touches something deeper than historical record alone. Both the Templars and the Freemasons are defined by secrecy, by the careful preservation of symbols and rituals, and by the sense that their public face conceals a more profound, hidden purpose. In both, the idea of initiation marks a passage, not just into membership, but into a guarded tradition that transcends generations. Today, some Masonic orders openly claim the Templar heritage, conducting elaborate ceremonies in which members don knightly regalia and reenact episodes from the order's history. Whether these are continuations of a genuine medieval legacy or symbolic reconstructions, they keep alive the possibility, however faint, that the connection is more than ceremonial. The truth may lie in fragments. A ritual echo here, a symbol preserved there, carried forward not through uninterrupted institution, but through shared ideals and carefully guarded traditions. Was the Masonic adoption of Templar imagery a symbolic alignment born centuries later, or was it the quiet resurfacing of an older order under a new name? Somewhere between the verifiable and the imagined, the Templar-Freemason link continues to hold its place in the collective imagination. And as with so many mysteries surrounding the Templars, one is left to wonder. Was this connection an invention of later centuries, or the final veil over a lineage that has never truly been broken? In the rolling hills of Midlothian, Scotland, a small stone chapel rises from the earth like something out of a dream. Rosslyn Chapel, built in the mid-15th century, is modest in size but astonishing in detail. Every surface, walls, columns, arches, is covered in intricate carvings. Angels play musical instruments. Vines twist into geometric knots. Figures from Christian tradition stand alongside symbols whose meaning seems older, more enigmatic. Sunlight filters through narrow windows, illuminating details that, at first glance, seem decorative, but perhaps are something more. Official history tells us that Rosslyn Chapel was commissioned in 1446 by Sir William Sinclair, a member of a powerful Scottish family. The Sinclairs were connected to nobility, the church, and, according to some accounts, ancient orders of knights. It is here that the legend of a Templar connection begins to emerge, intertwining with centuries of speculation and the chapel's haunting beauty. The Knights Templar had been suppressed over a century before Rosslyn's construction, but theories persist that some of their members escaped to Scotland, where Robert the Bruce's defiance of papal authority may have offered them sanctuary. If this is true, the Sinclairs, loyal to the Scottish crown and later linked in tradition to Freemasonry, could have been protectors of surviving Templar knowledge, relics, or even members themselves. Walking through Rosslyn, one is struck by certain carvings that seem to hint at this hidden past. Some depict the cross pate, the distinctive emblem of the Templars. Others resemble architectural motifs found in places associated with the order. More puzzling are the patterns that appear to encode sacred geometry, proportions and arrangements long associated with esoteric traditions, and which some believe the Templars may have inherited from their time on the Temple Mount in Palestine. Mainstream historians often caution that these symbols could be coincidental, or part of a broader medieval tradition of symbolic art. The cross pate, for example, appears in various forms outside Templar use, and sacred geometry was widely known to medieval stonemasons. But even if the symbols are not uniquely Templar, their concentration here, and the Sinclair family's reputation, invite deeper questions. Perhaps the most provocative theory concerns what might lie beneath the chapel. Local legends and later writings suggest the existence of a sealed crypt, untouched for centuries. Some say it contains the remains of knights in full armor. Others claim it holds treasures or relics brought from the Holy Land, possibly even artifacts the Templars recovered from beneath the Temple Mount. The Sinclair family has consistently denied permission for excavation, citing the sanctity of the site. The crypt remains sealed, its contents a matter of speculation rather than fact. Adding to the intrigue is Rosslyn's mix of Christian and seemingly pre-Christian imagery. Carvings of plants native to the Americas, such as maize, appear decades before Columbus's voyages, leading some to suggest the chapel's builders possessed knowledge of lands across the Atlantic. This detail has been linked, though tenuously, to theories that the Templars sailed westward after their suppression, possibly reaching North America. If such voyages took place, could Rosslyn's carvings be a quiet record of that journey? The chapel's relationship to later Freemasonry also fuels speculation. By the 18th century, Freemasons claimed symbolic descent from the Templars, and Rosslyn became a focal point in that narrative. Masonic ritual and symbolism appear to resonate with some of the chapel's carvings, from depictions of two standing pillars to detailed knotwork resembling patterns seen in Masonic tracing boards. Did the chapel serve as a bridge between the medieval Templars and the modern Masonic orders? Or are these connections the product of later reinterpretation, layered onto a structure already rich in symbolic meaning? Skeptics point out that much of the Templar-Rosslyn connection emerges from writings centuries after the chapel's construction. The idea of hidden relics, secret geometries, and encoded messages could be more a reflection of our desire for mystery than the intentions of the original builders. Yet, the density of unusual detail here, both in its artistry and its architectural layout, makes it difficult to dismiss the possibility that Rosslyn was designed to communicate something beyond its role as a place of worship. Even those who reject the more romanticized theories acknowledge that Rosslyn occupies a unique place in Scottish history. It stands at the crossroads of faith, politics, and symbolism, built by a family with both the means and the inclination to incorporate layers of meaning into its design. If the Sinclairs were indeed connected, however distantly, to Templar survivors, then Rosslyn might be the last physical echo of that legacy, a monument not to their military might, but to their hidden knowledge. The chapel invites more questions than it answers. Why were certain symbols chosen over others? What knowledge guided the stonemason's hands? And what, if anything, lies in the sealed crypt beneath its stone floor? Each carving, each shadowed corner seems to suggest that the answers are here, just out of reach, waiting for someone to understand the language in which they were written. Standing inside Rosslyn Chapel, the stillness feels almost deliberate, as if the building itself is holding its breath. The carved walls seem to watch in silence, guarding their secrets as they have for centuries. Perhaps the truth of Rosslyn's connection to the Knights Templar lies not in what we can see, but in what remains hidden, beneath the stone, behind the symbols, and deep within the currents of history. In the hushed glow of a cathedral treasury, relics rest in gilded reliquaries, slivers of ancient wood, fragments of iron, and faded cloth preserved for centuries. They are said to be remnants of the Passion of Christ, the crown of thorns, the true cross, the nails that pierced his hands and feet, the spear that struck his side. Each is wrapped in layers of tradition, veneration, and controversy. Yet, for all that has been preserved and displayed, there are others that have vanished from the historical record entirely, missing relics whose fate remains one of the most enduring enigmas in Christian history. By the medieval era, relics of the Passion were among the most sought-after treasures in Christendom. Pilgrims traveled great distances to see them, rulers paid fortunes to possess them, and churches that housed them became centers of wealth and influence. Constantinople, before its fall in 1204, was said to hold an extraordinary collection, gathered over centuries, safeguarded within the Byzantine imperial palace. Chroniclers recorded the presence of Christ's seamless robe, the holy sponge, and even the titulus, the wooden sign placed above the cross inscribed with "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews," in 3 languages. When the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople in 1204, many of these relics disappeared. Some were carried to Venice and Paris, others sold to Western monarchs. Yet several, including items directly tied to the Passion, simply vanished without trace. This is where the shadow of the Knights Templar begins to fall over the story. The Templars were active participants in the Crusades, both in combat and in securing and transporting valuable goods. Their headquarters on the Temple Mount in Palestine placed them near some of the most sacred sites in Christianity, and their network of fortresses, commanderies, and fleets made them uniquely positioned to safeguard or conceal treasures of immense spiritual significance. Could some of the missing Passion relics have passed into their hands? Mainstream historians acknowledge that the Templars would have had the means to move such objects, but evidence is scarce. No surviving inventory lists, Passion relics among the Order's possessions, and the few contemporary references to Templar-held treasures are frustratingly vague. Yet later traditions, particularly in France and Portugal, speak of sacred items hidden away before the Templars' arrest in 1307. Some accounts mention chests removed from Paris on the night of the raids, chests whose contents were never officially recorded. One of the most intriguing possibilities is the Spear of Longinus, the lance said to have pierced Christ's side. Several claimed spears exist today, but their provenance is disputed, and medieval records suggest there may once have been more than one fragment venerated as the original. Could one of these have vanished into Templar custody? Another is the Holy Chalice, sometimes conflated with the Holy Grail. While Spain's Santo Cáliz and other claimants are well known, it is conceivable that another vessel, associated with the Last Supper or the Crucifixion, was among the relics lost in the chaos of war and political intrigue. If the Templars possessed such an object, its disappearance after their suppression would be consistent with the Order's careful secrecy. Speculation also touches on the Crown of Thorns. The relic now housed in Paris was transferred there in the 13th century, but some researchers note that the original crown was said to have been divided into thorn fragments for distribution to various churches. The fate of several of these fragments remains unknown. If even one was entrusted to the Templars, it could have been carried far from Europe's centers of power, perhaps to Scotland, Portugal, or even beyond the known world. Skeptics point out that the medieval appetite for relics led to duplication and forgery on an enormous scale, making it difficult to distinguish between the genuine and the fabricated. What one chronicler described as the nail of the crucifixion might be one of many nails claimed by different churches. Yet even allowing for medieval exaggeration, the disappearance of certain relics from recorded history remains striking. For those who favor the Templar connection, the argument is less about individual artifacts and more about patterns of movement. The Order's combination of military discipline, religious devotion, and logistical skill would have made them ideal custodians for relics deemed too valuable or too dangerous to remain in public view. Their sudden downfall in 1307, coupled with the rapid dispersal or concealment of their wealth, creates a historical gap in which such relics could easily have vanished from sight. Some even suggest that the missing Passion relics were not merely devotional objects, but carried symbolic or political power, capable of inspiring loyalty, legitimizing rulers, or challenging established authority. In that sense, hiding them might have been as much an act of strategy as of piety. Today, the search for these relics is as much about meaning as it is about material discovery. If a long-lost fragment of the True Cross or the Spear of Longinus were to emerge from a sealed vault, how would it be authenticated? And would its significance be historical, spiritual, or something else entirely? The silence of the centuries offers no clear answers. Somewhere, perhaps in the depths of an unexcavated crypt, in the archives of an ancient monastery, or locked away in a private collection, the missing relics of the Passion may still exist. Were they ever in the hands of the Knights Templar, spirited away during one of history's most dramatic dissolutions of power? Or have they been lost to time, leaving only the faint echo of their presence in the pages of medieval chronicles? The possibility that these sacred objects still lie hidden, waiting for light to touch them once again, keeps the question alive and the mystery unsolved. In the quiet, climate-controlled archives of the Vatican's secret archives, now officially called the Vatican Apostolic Archive, lies a parchment that went unnoticed by the outside world for centuries. Its surface is a pale, aged cream, its Latin text written in a careful, steady hand, bearing the marks of the 14th century. Sealed with the faded impressions of papal authority, it is not ornate nor outwardly extraordinary. Yet the document it represents, the Chinon Parchment, has the power to reshape the story of the Knights Templar. Discovered in 2001 by Vatican researcher Barbara Frail, the Chinon Parchment records a secret proceeding held in August 1308 at the fortress of Chinon in France. There, Pope Clement V's envoys met with the imprisoned leaders of the Templars, Grand Master Jacques de Molay, Geoffrey de Charnay, and others, to hear their confessions and decide their fate. At the time, the Templars had been accused of heresy, blasphemy, and grotesque secret rituals, charges pushed relentlessly by King Philip IV of France. History has long remembered these accusations as the pretext for the order's destruction. But the Chinon Parchment tells a different story. According to the document, the Templar leaders admitted under questioning to certain irregular practices in their initiation rites, acts they claimed were symbolic and never meant to dishonor God. The papal envoys, acting under Clement V's authority, granted them absolution. In other words, the Pope had quietly forgiven the Templars and restored them to communion with the Church. If this is true, it raises profound questions. Why, then, did the order not survive? Why did Clement V, just a few years later in 1312, formally dissolve the Templars by papal bull? The answer, many historians believe, lies in politics. The Pope may have recognized the order's innocence in theological terms, but he faced immense pressure from Philip IV, whose debts to the Templars were vast and whose grip on power was strengthened by their destruction. By dissolving the order, without condemning it outright, Clement may have been attempting to appease the king while preserving a measure of moral authority. And yet, the secrecy surrounding the Chinon Parchment for so many centuries fuels more speculative interpretations. Why was this absolution never made public in the 14th century? If the Pope believed the Templars were not heretics, why allow them to be executed, their reputation forever stained? Some suggest the absolution was deliberately concealed to protect certain individuals or agreements from coming to light. Others wonder if the document hints at a deeper understanding between the papacy and the order, an arrangement that could have included hidden concessions, undisclosed knowledge, or even the quiet relocation of certain Templar assets. The location of the meeting itself invites curiosity. The fortress of Chinon, set on a rocky outcrop above the Vienne River, was a place of both security and seclusion. Here, far from the papal court and the public eye, the fate of one of the most powerful military orders in Christendom was debated. The parchment's language is formal and legalistic, but between its lines one can almost sense the tension. An order defending itself against charges it considered false. Envoys balancing religious judgment with political necessity, and the shadow of a king's influence pressing in from beyond the fortress walls. Mainstream historians see the Chinon Parchment as a remarkable but not miraculous find. Important because it clarifies that the papacy did not, in the strictest sense, declare the Templars heretics. But the document does not absolve them of every charge, nor does it undo the events that followed. For others, however, the parchment's very existence suggests that there was far more to the Templars' final years than the official record reveals. Could the absolution at Chinon have been part of a larger, unrecorded bargain? Did some members of the order secure release or protection in exchange for handing over certain treasures or secrets? If the Pope privately considered them loyal to the Church, might he have allowed a portion of the Templar network to survive, hidden within other orders or operating under a different name? These possibilities remain speculative, yet they fit into the larger tapestry of Templar legends, from their alleged flight to Scotland to their supposed influence on later secret societies. One detail that lingers in the imagination is the timing of the parchment's rediscovery. For nearly 700 years, it remained buried in the Vatican's archives, catalogued but unnoticed. How many other documents, perhaps equally significant, lie still unexamined in the vaults of the world's great repositories? And if the Chinon Parchment had never come to light, the long-standing narrative of the Templars as condemned heretics might have gone unchallenged in the realm of official history. Now, with the parchment in hand, the past feels less certain. It reveals that the Templars' end was not as clear-cut as once believed, that within the smoke of the stake and the weight of political intrigue, there was at least an attempt at reconciliation. But it also leaves us with a haunting gap. What was said within those stone walls at Chinon that never made it to parchment? What truths were agreed upon in words, not ink? The Chinon Parchment stands as both a revelation and a reminder that history is not always written in full view, and that some of its most important decisions may be recorded in documents that sleep for centuries before they are found. Somewhere in that long silence lies the rest of the story, still waiting to be told. In a dimly lit display case, resting on a bed of dark velvet, lies a small circular artifact of medieval origin. Weathered by centuries, its surface still bears a clear and curious image: two armored knights riding side by side on a single horse. This is the seal of the Knights Templar, one of the most distinctive and enduring symbols of the order. At first glance, it is a simple piece of wax impression, or metal stamp used to authenticate documents. But the image it carries has puzzled historians, theologians, and enthusiasts for centuries. The seal was officially adopted by the Templars in the early 12th century, a time when symbols were chosen with care and often carried layered meanings. The most common interpretation is rooted in humility. In the early days of the order, the Templars were poor, bound by vows of poverty, and their resources were scarce. According to this explanation, two knights sharing a single horse was a visual metaphor for their initial hardship, an emblem of their humility and unity in purpose. Yet, even in this seemingly straightforward reading, questions arise. Why would an order that eventually became one of the most powerful and wealthy institutions in medieval Europe retain a symbol of poverty long after it had outgrown it? By the mid-12th century, the Templars owned vast estates, commanded armies, and operated an advanced financial network across Christendom. Their fortunes had changed dramatically, yet the two knights on one horse remained at the heart of their identity. Some scholars propose a deeper, more esoteric meaning. In this view, the two knights may represent duality, perhaps the blending of the spiritual and the martial, or the unification of religious devotion and worldly action. The Templars were, after all, both monks and warriors, bound by the rule of the order to a life of prayer and combat. The shared horse could symbolize the inseparability of these roles, each knight a reflection of the other, moving together toward a common destiny. Others push the interpretation further, suggesting that the image may encode a hidden truth about the Templars' origins or secret mission. One theory links the symbol to the Templars' time in the Holy Land, specifically their headquarters on the Temple Mount in Palestine. Could the two riders represent an alliance between the order and another group, perhaps one with knowledge or traditions predating the Crusades? This speculation touches on more controversial ideas, including possible connections with Eastern Christian sects, Islamic mystics, or even guardians of ancient Jewish traditions. There is also the possibility that the seal alludes to a biblical reference. Some point to passages describing the pairing of disciples, or the imagery of Revelation in which figures ride together as agents of divine purpose. In this light, the two knights could signify a spiritual partnership beyond the physical constraints of the order itself, a symbolic bond between the Templars and a higher, perhaps hidden, authority. The surviving examples of the seal show minor variations, suggesting that it was reproduced in different contexts and perhaps even adapted over time. Some depictions show the riders in identical armor, reinforcing the idea of equality and unity. Others depict subtle differences, variations in helmets, shields, or posture, that invite speculation about whether the two figures were intended to represent specific individuals, perhaps even founders of the order such as Hugues de Payens and Godfrey de Saint-Omer. If so, the seal might be a memorial to the Brotherhood's earliest leaders, immortalizing their partnership at the inception of the Templar mission. Mainstream historians tend to favor the practical explanations, poverty, humility, unity, while acknowledging that symbols often acquire layered meanings as they are used over generations. But for those who look beyond the conventional, the seal of the two knights is a tantalizing clue, an image that seems to resist definitive interpretation. It appears at the intersection of faith, chivalry, and secrecy, much like the order itself. The seal's enduring mystique is heightened by the fact that it would have been impressed on official Templar documents, charters, letters, and legal agreements. Each time it was used, it carried the weight of the order's authority. For those who received such documents, the sight of the twin riders would have been more than decorative. It was the visual embodiment of the Templar identity. But to what extent did that image serve as a signal, perhaps even a code, understood only by those within the highest ranks? The possibility that the seal concealed a hidden meaning is not without precedent. Medieval orders and guilds often embedded symbolic layers into their emblems, visible to all but fully understood only by initiates. If the Templars had a secret mission, whether to protect certain relics, preserve forbidden knowledge, or maintain alliances beyond the gaze of church and crown, could the seal of the two knights have been a subtle reminder of that oath? Today, the original seals are rare, surviving in only a handful of museums and archives, yet the image remains one of the most reproduced and recognized symbols of the Templar legacy. It appears on modern books, coins, and monuments, still sparking debate among scholars and enthusiasts alike. Each interpretation, whether humble, symbolic, or conspiratorial, reveals as much about the interpreter as it does about the medieval order that once rode under the Red Cross. And so the question endures: was the seal of the two knights merely a reflection of the Templars' humble beginnings? Or was it a carefully chosen emblem, layered with meanings intended to be read only by those who understood its true significance? The answer, like so much of the Templar story, remains hidden, perhaps deliberately, beneath the surface of history. In the muted light of a medieval battlefield, a banner flutters above the armored ranks of the Knights Templar. Its design is stark, almost severe, split horizontally into two equal halves, black above and white below. To the uninitiated, it is simply a flag. To the Templars, it was the Beauseant, an emblem of their identity, their purpose, and, according to some, a code whose meaning reached far beyond its visible form. Historically, the Beauseant was the battle standard of the order, carried into war as both a rallying point and a symbol of unity. The white half was said to represent purity, faith, and the Templars' dedication to God. The black half, by contrast, symbolized the terror they sought to strike into the hearts of their enemies. Together, these colors embodied the dual nature of the order, merciful to the faithful, implacable toward their foes. Yet even this widely accepted explanation leaves room for deeper questions. Why these colors? Why this exact division? And why did the Templars choose a flag so visually simple when many medieval orders adopted elaborate heraldry? Some historians argue that the Beauseant's stark design was deliberate, meant to be instantly recognizable in the chaos of battle. Others suspect there may have been a more complex, even coded significance in its form. The name Beauseant itself adds to the intrigue. In Old French, it has been interpreted to mean beautiful or glorious, but also carries connotations of a war cry, Ayez Beauseant, urging warriors to rally under the banner. The word's layered meaning suggest that the Templars understood it as more than a mere identifier. Could it have been a password of sorts, a verbal key connecting battlefield command with deeper organizational secrecy? Some researchers have proposed that the Beauseant's black and white division was more than symbolic. It may have represented dualities central to the Templar worldview: light and darkness, life and death, earthly struggle and spiritual salvation. In this sense, the banner becomes a visual statement of the Order's role as both monks and warriors, a balance between contemplation and action, the sacred and the profane. More speculative theories venture into the realm of esoteric tradition. The black and white motif is found in many mystical systems, from ancient religious symbolism to later Masonic imagery. Could the Templars have drawn upon such traditions, encoding hidden teachings within the flag's design? Some see the Beauseant as an early expression of a cosmological principle, the interplay of opposing forces that, when united, create harmony. If so, the banner might have been as much a talisman of spiritual power as a signal of martial strength. The Beauseant was also tied to strict rules of conduct. Templar statutes dictated that the banner should never be abandoned in battle. If the bearer fell, another was to take it up immediately. If the Templars were forced to retreat, they were to rally under the Beauseant, regardless of the danger. This absolute loyalty to the banner suggests it was not merely a flag, but the embodiment of the Order's very soul. Losing it would mean more than defeat. It would mean the loss of their sacred identity. Intriguingly, some accounts hint that the Beauseant might have been used in contexts beyond open warfare. Certain Templar seals and documents depict the banner in positions or proportions that differ subtly from battlefield descriptions. Could these variations indicate a different, perhaps ceremonial or encoded use of the Beauseant? If the Order possessed knowledge or relics that required protection, might the banner's form or placement have conveyed messages recognizable only to initiates? The simplicity of the Beauseant has also led to speculation about hidden geometries. When divided precisely in half, the flag creates a ratio that could be interpreted through medieval understandings of proportion and harmony, concepts valued not only in architecture and art, but in mystical thought. Was this intentional design, a secret language woven into the Order's most public emblem? After the dissolution of the Templars in the early 14th century, the Beauseant largely vanished from European battlefields. Yet its imagery persisted, adopted in modified forms by groups claiming spiritual or symbolic descent from the Order. In some Masonic rites, black and white patterns, often in checkerboard form, appear as part of ritual spaces, echoing the same duality the Beauseant is thought to have represented. Whether these connections are a true inheritance or later invention is still debated. For modern historians, the Beauseant is a rare example of a medieval military symbol whose meaning was recorded yet remains layered in ambiguity. For those drawn to the more speculative side of Templar history, it is a key, one that may unlock insights into the Order's hidden beliefs, their understanding of the world, and perhaps even the reasons they inspired such enduring fascination. Still, the central question remains: was the Beauseant merely a rallying flag, a practical tool of war adorned with a moral reminder, or was it something more, a coded emblem whose true significance has been obscured by the passing centuries? The answer lies somewhere between the black and the white, in the space where certainty fades and mystery begins. In the dim recesses of a medieval archive, bound in worn leather and edged with the dust of centuries, lies a manuscript that seems ordinary until the eye lingers on its text. The letters, neat and deliberate, form no words in Latin, French, or any known tongue. They are strange symbols, crosses, triangles, and abstract marks, arranged in a way that suggests meaning yet resists comprehension. This, some believe, is an example of the cipher writing attributed to the Knights Templar. The Templars, as a military monastic order, were masters of secrecy. They guarded their operations, their alliances, and their treasures with methods that often eluded the prying eyes of kings and rivals. Cipher texts, encoded messages designed to be understood only by initiates, would have been a natural tool for an order that spanned continents and engaged in sensitive political, military, and financial dealings. But while hints of such codes survive, the exact systems they used remain a matter of debate. One of the most widely discussed possibilities is the so-called Templar cipher, a system based on simple geometric shapes, sometimes linked to the later Masonic pigpen cipher. In its basic form, this method replaces letters with symbols derived from a grid or cross pattern, an arrangement that could be subtly incorporated into architectural carvings, seals, or even battlefield signals. Could such a cipher have originated with the Templars during their time in the Holy Land, perhaps influenced by systems they encountered in the courts of Islamic scholars or Byzantine administrators? Manuscripts from the late medieval period occasionally contain odd, non-standard symbols that some researchers suspect are remnants of such a system. Yet the provenance of these documents is often uncertain, and scholars disagree on whether they are truly Templar in origin or later imitations. Still, the possibility is compelling, especially when such symbols are found alongside references to known Templar figures or strongholds. The potential uses of cipher texts within the order were many. Messages between distant commanderies could be intercepted by rival factions, making encryption a safeguard against espionage. Instructions regarding the movement of funds, critical to the Templars' role as the bankers of Europe, might have been encoded to protect against fraud or theft. More tantalizing is the idea that cipher texts might have been used to record the location of hidden relics or treasures, particularly if the order did indeed spirit away valuable artifacts from the Temple Mount in Palestine or from Europe before their suppression in 1307. Some modern cryptographers have attempted to reconstruct what a Templar cipher might have looked like by reverse engineering known medieval encryption methods and overlaying them with the order's iconography. In these reconstructions, the cross pate, the eight-pointed cross, and even the layout of the Beauseant flag serve as frameworks for substitution ciphers. While these designs are speculative, they reveal how readily Templar symbols could double as cipher keys, hiding messages in plain sight. More speculative theories suggest that the Templars' use of cipher texts may have extended beyond practical communication into the realm of esoteric knowledge. In this view, certain religious or philosophical teachings, perhaps those deemed heretical by the Church, could have been recorded in cipher to preserve them for future generations without attracting immediate condemnation. Such documents, if they survived the order's fall, would be of immense interest to anyone seeking to understand the Templars' inner beliefs. Evidence for this idea is circumstantial but intriguing. In some Templar sites, carved inscriptions remain that blend Latin letters with unfamiliar symbols. Are these mere decorative flourishes or fragments of a coded script? Without a surviving key, the answer remains elusive. There are also tantalizing references in trial records from the early 14th century. In testimonies, often given under duress, some Templars mentioned secret writings or mysteries of the order recorded in ways only certain brothers could read. While these accounts must be treated cautiously, they do suggest that not all of the order's knowledge was meant for open circulation. In the centuries after the Templars' dissolution, stories of hidden documents persisted. Some claimed that cipher texts were smuggled to Scotland, Portugal, or remote monastic archives, preserved by allies or absorbed into other secretive groups. A few researchers have pointed to cryptic inscriptions in Rosslyn Chapel as possible descendants of Templar codes, though such claims remain unproven. Skeptics argue that the lack of definitive authenticated cipher texts from the Templar period points to exaggeration or myth-making. Encryption was certainly known in medieval Europe, but it was not widely practiced outside of certain political or mercantile contexts. Could the image of the Templar Code simply be a romantic projection onto an already secretive order? Yet the absence of evidence is not necessarily evidence of absence. Cipher texts are designed to conceal, and if the Templars were as skilled at secrecy as their reputation suggests, it is possible that their most important encoded writings have either been destroyed or remain undiscovered in private collections or forgotten archives. Standing in front of one of these manuscripts, its symbols mute yet deliberate, it is difficult not to wonder what truths might lie within. Were these marks a record of troop movements? A ledger of gold and silver hidden from the king's grasp? A theological treatise that would have challenged the church's authority? Or were they something even more extraordinary? A message meant for a future time when the world would be ready to understand it? Until such a text is found and its code broken, the Templar cipher remains a tantalizing possibility, a silent language that may yet speak, if only we can learn how to listen. Along the sun-bleached coast of Cyprus, the ruins of medieval fortresses rise above the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean. Their weathered stones, shaped by salt and centuries, once stood at the heart of the Knights Templar's last great stronghold in the east. In the shadow of these walls, in storerooms and chambers now silent, the order is said to have kept records, manuscripts that chronicled not only their military and financial operations, but perhaps secrets too dangerous to carry back to Europe. These are the lost Templar manuscripts of Cyprus, a chapter of history that lingers in whispers and speculation. The Templars first came to Cyprus in the late 12th century, acquiring the island from King Richard the Lionheart after the Third Crusade. Though they quickly sold it to Guy de Lusignan, their presence on the island never truly ended. In the decades that followed, Cyprus became a staging ground for Crusader campaigns and a refuge for the order after its expulsion from the Holy Land. By the early 14th century, when the Templars were under siege in Europe, Cyprus was one of the last places where they could still operate openly, at least for a time. Contemporary records confirm that the Templars maintained extensive archives. Their order was a vast international network, and the movement of troops, funds, and supplies required meticulous documentation. Financial ledgers, land deeds, maps of fortifications, and detailed inventories would have been kept in secure storage. More intriguing still are the possible theological, philosophical, or even scientific writings the Templars might have guarded. Materials that could have included translations of texts from the East, copies of ancient works preserved in the libraries of the Levant, or coded instructions for hidden caches of treasure or relics. When the papal suppression of the order began in 1307, many Templars in Europe were arrested and their properties seized. But on Cyprus, the situation was more complex. The island was under the Lusignan kings, who were more cautious in enforcing papal decrees. For months, perhaps longer, the Templars had time to prepare, conceal, or transfer their most sensitive possessions. This is where the trail of the manuscripts becomes tantalizingly uncertain. Mainstream historians suggest that much of the Templars' Cypriot archive was likely confiscated and absorbed into the records of the Hospitallers, who inherited many of their holdings after the order's dissolution. If so, the manuscripts might still exist, buried deep in the archives of later knightly orders or in church repositories, mislabeled and forgotten. But others believe the Templars acted swiftly to secure their most important writings, either hiding them on the island or sending them by sea to safe havens in Scotland, Portugal, or the more remote corners of the Mediterranean. One of the more persistent theories places the missing manuscripts in the mountain ranges of Cyprus itself. The Troodos Mountains, with their labyrinth of valleys and secluded monasteries, were within reach of Templar outposts. Several of these monasteries, dating back to the medieval period, are known to have preserved rare manuscripts. Could some of the Order's own records have been hidden within these cloisters, disguised among religious texts, their true significance recognized only by a select few? Other theories take a more dramatic turn, suggesting that the manuscripts were loaded onto ships at the port of Limassol and sailed under cover of darkness to destinations unknown. Given the Templars' maritime capabilities and their network of allies, such a mission would not have been beyond their reach. If these documents were indeed removed from Cyprus, they may now lie in private collections, unrecognized for what they are, or in remote archives whose curators have never connected them to the Order. What might these lost manuscripts contain? The most conservative guess is that they would reveal the administrative genius of the Templars, detailed financial accounts, logistical records of their campaigns, and correspondences that could shed light on the political machinations of the late Crusader period. Yet more speculative voices suggest they could hold far older knowledge, translations of works recovered from the Temple Mount in Palestine, diagrams of forgotten fortifications, astronomical charts, or treatises on sacred geometry that later found echoes in European cathedral design. Some even speculate about encoded references to relics like the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, artifacts the Templars have long been rumored to possess. Skeptics argue that such ideas are fueled more by romantic legend than evidence, pointing out that no confirmed Templar manuscript of this type has ever surfaced. But the very absence of such documents, despite the Order's size and scope, raises its own questions. How could an institution so dependent on written records leave so few behind, unless many were deliberately destroyed or concealed? The possibility that the manuscripts still exist somewhere in Cyprus cannot be entirely dismissed. In recent years, archaeologists and historians have uncovered forgotten medieval storage rooms beneath churches and castles on the island, their contents undisturbed for centuries. Most yield mundane artifacts, but each discovery keeps alive the hope that one day a bundle of parchment bearing the Templar seal might emerge from the shadows. Standing in the ruins of a Templar commandery in Cyprus today, the air warm with the scent of salt and wild herbs, it is easy to imagine the weight of those lost writings. Did they record truths that would challenge our understanding of the medieval world? Did they hide knowledge that was never meant to be revealed? And if they still survive, are they locked away in plain sight, waiting for the right eyes to recognize them? The Mediterranean wind whispers over the stones, carrying with it the unanswered questions of centuries. Somewhere, perhaps in a vault, perhaps in a mountain monastery, the lost Templar manuscripts may yet be waiting to speak. In the rolling countryside of southern France, the region of Languedoc is dotted with quiet stone villages, Romanesque churches, and the crumbling remains of medieval fortresses. It is a landscape that seems timeless, its fields and hills whispering stories from an age of knights, crusades, and secret oaths. Yet among these relics of history are markings that continue to puzzle scholars. Mysterious symbols carved into walls, doorways, and even hidden corners of rural chapels. Many bear the distinctive cross pate of the Knights Templar, but others are less easily explained. The Templars were active in Languedoc from the early 12th century, establishing commanderies, farms, and fortified houses throughout the region. They played a crucial role in the local economy, managing estates and offering protection to travelers. But Languedoc was also home to the Cathars, whose persecution in the Albigensian Crusade left deep scars. The overlap of these two histories has given rise to enduring speculation. Did the Templars in their time here leave behind coded messages or symbols with meanings that went beyond the merely decorative? Some of the carvings are straightforward, inscriptions of dates, coats of arms, and crosses marking Templar property. Others are far stranger. In one rural church, a worn stone near the altar bears a geometric design of interlocking circles, its precision suggesting more than casual artistry. In another, a spiral is carved into the wall near a concealed stairway, a form reminiscent of medieval labyrinths used for spiritual meditation. Could these be remnants of a symbolic language known only to members of the order? Mainstream historians caution that many such designs were common in medieval Europe and not uniquely Templar. Geometric motifs appear in Christian art, pagan traditions, and even the work of local stonemasons. The spiral, for instance, can symbolize eternity or divine creation in multiple cultural contexts. But when these symbols appear alongside the Templar cross, or in buildings documented as Templar holdings, their meaning becomes harder to dismiss as coincidence. Some researchers propose that the carvings may have served practical purposes. Symbols could have marked safe routes for travelers, indicated the presence of Templar-controlled land, or denoted locations of stored supplies. Others see in them a kind of sacred geography, a map of spiritual or esoteric knowledge, perhaps connected to the order's rumored interest in sacred geometry and the proportions of Solomon's temple. The interlocking circles, known in some traditions as the Vesica Piscis, or Flower of Life, have been linked to mystical interpretations of creation and divine harmony. Did the Templars use such imagery to encode theological principles that could not be openly taught? The more speculative theories suggest links between the Templars and the remnants of the Cathar movement. Languedoc was a stronghold of Cathar belief until their near eradication in the early 13th century. Some legends claim that the Templars protected surviving Cathars or preserved elements of their teachings in symbolic form. If true, certain carvings could represent a fusion of Templar and Cathar thought, symbols that conveyed ideas about duality, spiritual purity, or hidden knowledge. One of the most intriguing sites is a former Templar commandery, where, in a narrow passage, the walls are etched with an array of symbols, crosses, stars, unfamiliar letters, and what appears to be a crude map. The map seems to show the outline of a fortified site in relation to a river bend, but no matching location has ever been conclusively identified. Was this an unfinished plan, a coded reference to a hidden site, or merely the idle markings of a long-forgotten stonemason? Archaeologists and historians have documented these carvings with care, but interpretation remains elusive. Without surviving records from the Templars themselves, the original meaning, if any, behind these symbols is locked away by time. Some may well be decorative flourishes, while others might be the last surviving traces of messages intended for eyes that could never speak of what they saw. The idea that the Templars left behind a symbolic code in Languedoc has been fueled by more modern discoveries. In the 19th century, treasure hunters in the region claimed to have found stones marked with both Templar crosses and cryptic symbols. While many of these finds cannot be verified, they have become part of the region's lore, blending history with legend. Standing in one of these ancient chapels, the air cool and still, it is easy to feel the weight of centuries pressing in. A shaft of sunlight falls across a carved cross pate, its edges softened by time. Beside it, barely visible, is a faint pattern of lines and arcs. Is it simply a mason's mark, left behind without thought? Or is it part of a message that has been hiding in plain sight for over 700 years? The Languedoc stones do not answer such questions. They only invite them. And perhaps that is their true power. Each symbol, whether mundane or profound, becomes a point of connection between past and present, between the known and the unknowable. Somewhere, carved into the quiet walls of this ancient land, the Templars may have left a message. Whether we will ever learn to read it remains a mystery still waiting in the shadows. In the heart of Portugal, rising above the small town of Tomar, stands the Convent of Christ, a sprawling complex of stone that once served as the spiritual and administrative center of the Knights Templar in the region. Its most striking feature, the corolla, or round church, commands immediate attention. Built in the late 12th century, this circular sanctuary is a rare architectural echo of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, reflecting the Templars' deep connection to the Holy Land. Sunlight filters through narrow windows, casting shifting patterns on walls adorned with centuries-old paintings, gilded carvings, and intricate stonework. But hidden among its beauty are details that resist simple explanation. The chapel is a place where art and geometry intertwine. The layout itself is steeped in symbolic meaning, a perfect circle encasing a central octagon, both forms long associated with divine perfection and spiritual transformation. Medieval stonemasons often worked with such shapes, but here the proportions seem unusually precise, almost as if they were calculated to embody a secret code. Did the Templars intend these measurements to convey a hidden truth, accessible only to those initiated into their mysteries? Within the painted panels and sculpted ornamentation, certain images stand out. Alongside depictions of biblical scenes are subtle insertions. A small, almost imperceptible carving of a knight holding a chalice, a repeated pattern of 8-pointed stars, and plant motifs whose species seem oddly specific. Were these simply decorative choices, or could they form a visual language? Historians have noted that medieval artisans often embedded messages in religious art, blending sacred imagery with personal or ideological symbols. In Tomar, some believe the Templars went further, encoding information about their spiritual beliefs, their history, or even the treasures they were rumored to guard. The order's presence in Portugal was unique. Unlike in France, where the Templars were violently suppressed in 1307, the Portuguese branch was transformed into the Order of Christ, preserving much of its leadership, resources, and influence. Tomar became the seat of this continuity. Could the chapel's subtle details have served as a repository for the order's knowledge, hidden in plain sight during a time when secrecy was essential for survival? Some researchers have attempted to read the chapel as if it were a manuscript in stone and pigment. The 8-pointed star, for example, is a shape associated with regeneration and baptism, but in Templar lore, it has also been linked to the geometry of Solomon's Temple, a structure the order is believed to have studied extensively during their years in Jerusalem. The repeated presence of this star within the Kerala has led to speculation that it may have been a symbolic signature, pointing to an enduring link between the Templars and sacred architecture. Then there are the floral motifs, stylized leaves, vines, and blossoms that, to a casual observer, seem merely ornamental. Yet some botanists and historians claim that certain plants represented in the carvings are not native to Portugal, raising questions about whether they might reference distant lands the Templars had visited, or perhaps encode medicinal or alchemical knowledge. The more speculative interpretations venture into the realm of cryptography. Could the combination of images, shapes, and proportions be part of a cipher? In medieval times, ciphers often relied on substitution, assigning letters or numbers to symbols. If the corolla's details were systematically arranged, they might form a code that, once deciphered, could reveal a text or instruction. While no definitive solution has been reached, occasional patterns in the artwork suggest intentional placement rather than random decoration. There are also connections drawn between the chapel's design and astronomical alignments. The way light enters the building at specific times of the year, particularly during the equinox, has led some to suspect that the Templars incorporated celestial symbolism into its construction. Was the corolla not just a place of worship, but also a calendar in stone, marking sacred times known only to the initiated? Skeptics argue that such theories risk overcomplicating what might simply be a masterpiece of medieval religious art. Yet even they acknowledge that the Templars were no ordinary monastic order. They combined the roles of warrior, banker, and mystic, and their legacy is one of both discipline and secrecy. In such a context, the idea that they might have used their principal chapel to safeguard messages is far from impossible. Visitors to Tomar often describe a peculiar sensation inside the corolla, a feeling of quiet intensity, as if the walls themselves hold their breath. The blend of rounded geometry, richly painted surfaces, and intricate reliefs creates an atmosphere that is at once sacred and enigmatic. Standing at the center, one is surrounded by centuries of devotion and by an architecture that seems to whisper of something just beyond reach. If the chapel does hold a code, its meaning remains locked behind layers of interpretation and time. Perhaps it is a record of the Templars' beliefs, preserved against the threat of eradication. Perhaps it is a map, whether to physical treasures, spiritual truths, or both. Or perhaps it is simply the work of master craftsmen, whose skill and imagination left us something so complex that it feels like a riddle. And so the corolla remains, its patterns of light and shadow shifting with the day, its carved symbols patiently waiting. The question lingers like the echo of footsteps in its circular nave. In these stones, in this geometry, in these hidden details, did the Templars leave us a message we have yet to understand? In the cool, dim recesses of a medieval archive, the scent of ancient parchment lingers in the air, a faint mixture of dust, ink, and leather. Here, shelves groan under the weight of centuries-old ledgers, each bound in thick covers and marked with faded, cryptic symbols. To the untrained eye, these books are relics of a forgotten age. To a historian, they are fragments of a vast network of records once maintained by the most powerful and enigmatic financial organization of the Middle Ages, the Knights Templar. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the Templars were not only warriors of the Crusades, they were also the architects of a revolutionary banking system. Pilgrims traveling from Europe to the Holy Land in Palestine could deposit their wealth with the Templars in their home country and receive a coded document, an early form of a traveler's check, which could be redeemed at any Templar preceptory along the route. In an era when banditry and political instability made travel perilous, this system offered unprecedented security. It also granted the Templars extraordinary influence, connecting them financially to kings, merchants, and even the church itself. The records of these transactions, who deposited, who withdrew, and in what amounts, would have been meticulously kept. Yet of the countless documents the Templars must have produced over nearly 2 centuries, only a fraction survive. Some appear in royal archives, others in church collections, and still more in scattered private holdings. Many, however, are simply gone. Were they destroyed during the suppression of the order in 1307, or were they deliberately hidden? The mystery deepens when one considers the Templars' sudden and catastrophic fall. On October 13, 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of the order's members, seizing their properties and demanding access to their accounts. The charges leveled against them were both scandalous and politically expedient: heresy, idolatry, and secret oaths. But beneath the public accusations lay a clear financial motive. Philip was deeply in debt to the Templars, and controlling their records meant controlling, or erasing, evidence of that debt. Some historians believe that before the king's agents could seize the archives, the Templars spirited away their most sensitive documents. From Paris, they may have moved them to hidden strongholds, perhaps in the countryside, perhaps even abroad. A few tantalizing references from the early 14th century speak of chests of ledgers being loaded onto carts or ships in the days before the arrests. No one knows where they went. The absence of these records leaves vast gaps in our understanding of the Templars' true wealth and reach. Contemporary accounts suggest they financed not only crusading expeditions, but also royal marriages, papal projects, and major construction efforts across Europe. Did their archives contain the details of hidden investments, shares in merchant fleets, stakes in mining ventures, or property far beyond their known holdings? Speculative theories take the question further. Some suggest the missing ledgers might reveal evidence of secret alliances with rival powers, or even payments to secure relics and knowledge from the East. Others imagine that among the mundane accounting entries, the Templars embedded coded messages, a financial cipher concealing instructions, maps, or ideological manifestos. Could an apparently simple list of grain shipments have pointed to something far more valuable? Then there is the question of where such records could be hidden for centuries. The Templars operated hundreds of preceptories across Europe and the Mediterranean. Some were abandoned, others absorbed into new orders, but many retained their original stone vaults, structures built for security, both physical and symbolic. Could the banking records be lying still, sealed behind walls or beneath floors? Their ink fading, but their meaning intact? Modern researchers have traced possible leads. In Portugal, where the order was reconstituted as the Order of Christ, archives from the 14th and 15th centuries contain peculiar gaps, whole years for which no financial records exist. In Cyprus, once a Templar stronghold after their retreat from Palestine, a few surviving ledgers include mysterious annotations in an unfamiliar shorthand, never conclusively deciphered. In the Vatican Library, restricted collections contain references to Templar loans and accounts, but the primary documents are absent, their whereabouts unrecorded. Even more intriguing are occasional discoveries of loose pages in unexpected places, a single leaf of Templar script found in a provincial archive in France, or a fragment of a ledger used centuries later as binding material for another book. Each is like a torn scrap of a map, hinting at the vastness of what has been lost. If the full set of Templar banking records were ever found, what might they reveal? Would they confirm the image of the Templars as disciplined, efficient financiers of the medieval world? Or would they expose a hidden dimension to their activities, one that explains both their meteoric rise and their dramatic fall? Perhaps they would shed light on the persistent rumors of a treasure, whether in gold, relics, or knowledge, that has haunted their story for 700 years. Standing before the silent shelves of an ancient archive, one cannot help but imagine a hidden room somewhere, its air thick with the scent of centuries, where chests of these lost ledgers remain sealed. Inside, each entry in each book could be a clue, not only to the Templars' economic power, but to the network of influence, obligation, and secrecy that sustained them. The question endures: were these records truly lost to history, or are they waiting in some forgotten vault to tell the final untold chapter of the Templar story? In the heart of France, rising above the rooftops of the town that shares its name, Chartres Cathedral commands the horizon with its towering spires and intricate stonework. Its facade, adorned with hundreds of sculptures, seems to speak a silent language, a visual scripture carved into limestone. The light within is transformed by some of the most breathtaking stained glass windows in Europe, each panel a cascade of deep blues, ruby reds, and glowing golds that seem almost to shimmer with a light of their own. To step inside is to step into a world of deliberate design, where every arch, every proportion, and every shadow appears to hold meaning. Construction of the current cathedral began in the late 12th century, following a devastating fire in 1194. Records tell us that a massive rebuilding effort took place, funded in part by wealthy patrons, but also through a mysterious infusion of resources that remains poorly explained. It is here that the story intersects with the shadowed legacy of the Knights Templar. The order had become a formidable force by this time, with wealth, influence, and skilled architects at their disposal. Some historians believe that the Templars may have contributed to the cathedral's reconstruction, not merely in funding, but in design and symbolic detail. Why would a military monastic order have such an interest in a cathedral in Chartres? The answer may lie in the building's unusual features. For one, its dimensions and layout are said to reflect principles of sacred geometry, a system of design rooted in mathematical ratios thought to reflect divine order. The precision of these alignments suggests a level of architectural knowledge that, for the period, would have been exceptional. Could the Templars, with their exposure to advanced knowledge from the East during the Crusades, have brought such concepts back to Europe and embedded them in the cathedral's very structure? The floor itself offers another clue. At the center of the nave lies an enormous labyrinth, a winding path inlaid in pale stone against a darker background. Walking its circular pattern was meant as a form of pilgrimage, a symbolic journey to the Holy Land without leaving the safety of home. Some researchers suggest that the labyrinth's dimensions and placement might encode astronomical or geographical information, possibly even pointing toward locations significant to the Templars. Is this an elaborate spiritual tool or a hidden map? The cathedral's famous stained glass may also play a role in the mystery. Among the countless biblical scenes, a few panels stand out for their enigmatic imagery. Knights in white mantles bearing red crosses, ships under full sail, and geometric motifs not typical in ecclesiastical art of the time. Are these simply artistic flourishes, or do they hint at the Templars' presence and influence? Some glass historians have noted that the deep Chartres blue used in the windows has never been fully replicated, its formula lost to time. Could this too have been knowledge carried back from distant lands, guarded as closely as the Templars guarded their other secrets? Beneath the cathedral lies yet another puzzle. The crypt of Chartres is one of the largest in France, a network of chambers and passages whose foundations predate the Gothic structure above by centuries. Local legend holds that the site has been a place of worship for millennia, possibly even since pre-Christian times, and that the cathedral was built atop a much older sacred space. Some speculative theories suggest that the Templars, with their fascination for ancient relics and sites of power, might have had a hand in preserving or concealing something in these subterranean vaults. There are whispers of sealed chambers, never opened in modern times, that could hold artifacts long forgotten. Adding another layer to the intrigue is the possibility that Chartres Cathedral incorporates symbolic references to the Temple of Solomon in Jerusalem. Certain architectural proportions and decorative motifs bear resemblance to descriptions of the temple as recorded in biblical and medieval sources. Given that the Templars took their name and inspiration from their headquarters on the Temple Mount in Palestine, such parallels might not be coincidental. Were the builders of Chartres attempting to recreate, in stone and glass, a reflection of a sacred structure lost to history? Mainstream scholarship offers more grounded explanations. The cathedral's grandeur and unusual features can be attributed to the skill of its medieval builders, the influence of theological ideas circulating at the time, and the patronage of powerful bishops. Yet these explanations do not entirely erase the coincidences that draw the Templars into the story. Their known expertise in engineering, their deep pockets, and their interest in symbolic and sacred architecture make their possible involvement plausible, even if unproven. Still, questions persist. If the Templars were involved, what was their ultimate goal? Was Chartres merely a place of worship for the faithful? Or was it also a repository of encoded knowledge, a monument built to preserve secrets in plain sight? Could its walls conceal messages that only those trained in certain esoteric traditions could read? And if so, has someone already deciphered them, keeping the answers hidden from public view? Standing in the cathedral today, bathed in the ethereal glow of its windows, one cannot help but feel the weight of centuries pressing in. The play of light and shadow seems almost deliberate, as if guiding the observer's attention toward something just out of reach. The labyrinth lies silent underfoot, inviting a journey that may be more than symbolic. The stones themselves, weathered yet enduring, hold stories they have not yet told, and so the mystery endures. Is Chartres Cathedral simply one of the finest achievements of Gothic architecture? Or is it also a silent witness to a hidden chapter in the history of the Knights Templar? Somewhere in its soaring vaults, its winding crypts, or its radiant glass, might the key to that secret still be waiting, unseen by the countless eyes that pass through its doors each year. High in the rugged mountains of northern Persia, where jagged peaks cut into the sky and mist curls like ancient smoke along the valleys, the fortress of Alamut once stood, remote, impregnable, and steeped in legend. Here, far from the bustling ports of the Mediterranean and the battlefields of the Crusader states, a different kind of power took root. This was the stronghold of the Nizari Ismailis, known to their enemies in Europe as the Assassins, a secretive sect whose influence spread far beyond their mountainous domain. Stories of their precision killings, their use of deception, and their unwavering loyalty to their leader, the Old Man of the Mountain, were whispered among crusaders and chroniclers alike. The Knights Templar, by contrast, were a military monastic order born in the heart of Christendom, with fortresses scattered from Palestine to Portugal. Their mandate was clear: protect pilgrims, defend Christian holdings in the East, and uphold their vows. And yet, in the strange crossroads of the Crusades, where alliances could shift as swiftly as the desert wind, some historians suggest that these two seemingly opposed forces may have found common ground. Documented encounters between the Templars and the Assassins were rare, but not absent. In the 12th century, as Crusader states struggled to hold their territories, the Templars sometimes acted as intermediaries between the Nizari and Christian rulers. Records hint at truces, negotiated safe passages, and even the exchange of gifts. Were these acts purely pragmatic, born of necessity in a fractured political landscape? Or did they point to something deeper, a mutual understanding between two secretive orders that both wielded influence through methods not fully visible to the public eye? What is most intriguing is that the Templars and the Assassins, despite their vastly different religious and cultural backgrounds, shared certain qualities. Both orders were tightly organized, bound by oath, and answerable only to their respective leaders. Both had reputations for strategic thinking, and, according to some accounts, for holding knowledge that was as valuable as any fortress. Could these similarities have allowed for a covert exchange, not only of information, but perhaps of techniques, symbols, or philosophies? One theory suggests that the Templars may have respected the Assassins for their discipline and cunning, even if they did not condone their methods. Some speculative historians have gone further, wondering if certain Templar tactics, small, highly mobile units, or their apparent understanding of psychological warfare, might have been influenced by what they observed in their occasional dealings with the Nizari. While mainstream scholarship cautions against overstating these connections, the possibility lingers in the spaces where the records fall silent. The question grows more tantalizing when one considers the rumors of shared enemies and hidden diplomacy. During the Crusades, both Templars and Assassins faced the looming power of larger Islamic dynasties, such as the Seljuks and later the Mamluks. In this context, temporary alliances between such unlikely partners may not have been unthinkable. Could it be that beneath the surface of recorded history, the Templars and the Assassins found ways to assist one another? Not as friends, but as pragmatic actors in a world where survival often depended on bending rigid ideals? More speculative theories tread even further from accepted history. Some suggest that the Templars, known for their rumored connections to esoteric traditions, may have engaged in private exchanges with the assassins regarding mystical or philosophical teachings. The Nizari were part of a branch of Islam with deep intellectual traditions, including allegorical interpretations of scripture and secret initiatory knowledge. Could fragments of these ideas have found their way into Templar circles, subtly influencing their own spiritual or symbolic systems? Even architecture has entered the debate. While the Templars' fortresses in the Levant were built on European and Byzantine principles, a few researchers point out design elements, such as certain hidden passageways or courtyards, that bear a passing resemblance to features in Nizari strongholds. Is this coincidence, parallel evolution in military architecture, or a faint trace of cross-cultural borrowing? Of course, the more grounded interpretation is that both orders operated in the same volatile region for decades, and their occasional contact was simply the result of political necessity. Yet the aura of secrecy surrounding both groups makes it difficult to dismiss the possibility that more passed between them than what official records reveal. Then there are the persistent legends, stories that after the fall of Acre in 1291, some Templars fled not westward to Europe, but eastward, finding sanctuary among Nizari communities. While there is no conclusive evidence to support this, the very survival of the rumor speaks to how enduring the perceived connection between the two orders has become in the public imagination. The most intriguing artifacts of this supposed link are not physical, but conceptual. In both Templar and Assassin lore, loyalty to the order superseded all else. Secrecy was paramount, and the mission, whether earthly or divine, justified extraordinary measures. It is tempting to imagine that in moments away from the battlefield, far from the eyes of kings and chroniclers, members of these two orders may have spoken, not as enemies, but as men who understood the burden of serving a cause shrouded in mystery. Yet the evidence remains frustratingly incomplete. The surviving records, letters, chronicles, and diplomatic accounts offer tantalizing glimpses, but no definitive proof. They leave us to wonder how much was deliberately omitted, perhaps to protect reputations, perhaps to conceal understandings that would have been scandalous in their time. Today, the ruins of Alamut are little more than weathered stone and scattered foundations, while the Templars' castles in Palestine have long since been repurposed or fallen into decay. But in the silence of these places, one can still imagine a meeting in a shadowed chamber, where two men, one in a white mantle with a red cross, the other in the garb of the mountains, spoke in hushed tones of matters no chronicler would dare record. Did such meetings truly occur? Were the Templars and the Assassins merely occasional negotiating partners, or was there a deeper exchange of knowledge that has been lost to history? And if such an exchange did happen, might traces of it still lie hidden, in manuscripts that have yet to be found, or in the unspoken traditions of organizations that trace their lineage back to these enigmatic orders? Beneath the cold stone of an ancient Templar commandery, in a vault where the air hangs heavy with centuries of silence, lies an object as stark as it is unsettling. A human skull resting upon two crossed thigh bones. The light of a flickering torch catches its hollow sockets, casting elongated shadows across the damp walls. It is a symbol instantly recognizable today, most often associated with pirates and danger, but in the medieval world, it carried far older and deeper meanings. Among the mysteries of the Knights Templar, few are as provocative or as enigmatic as their supposed connection to the skull and crossbones. The origins of this emblem within Templar lore are elusive. Some surviving Templar gravestones in Europe display it plainly, a carefully carved skull set above two bones in a cross formation. These graves, often weathered and partially erased by time, still hold their geometry with stubborn clarity. Were these merely memento mori, symbols meant to remind the living of their mortality? Or did they represent something far more secretive, The skull and crossbones had long been a motif in Christian art, appearing in depictions of Golgotha, the place of the skull, where Christ was crucified. In many icons and paintings, a skull is shown at the base of the cross, said to represent the bones of Adam buried beneath the site of crucifixion. This link between death, redemption, and resurrection was a potent one. Could it be that the Templars adopted the symbol as a coded theological statement, tying their martial mission to the very heart of the Christian story? Yet the Templars were not known for embellishing their public image with such motifs, at least not openly. Their official seals and banners bore the red cross on white, a stark emblem of purity and sacrifice. The skull and crossbones, by contrast, appeared sporadically, often in private contexts such as grave markers or architectural carvings hidden from casual view. This raises an unsettling question. Was the emblem meant only for those within the order, a symbol of initiation, mortality, and perhaps a reminder of the vows they had sworn? Legends swirl around the supposed origin of the Templar version of the skull and crossbones. One of the most enduring tales claims that during their campaigns in Palestine, the Templars uncovered the remains of an important biblical figure. Some versions say John the Baptist. Others claim it was a relic of Christ himself. According to these stories, the bones were arranged in this distinctive pattern and preserved as a relic of immense spiritual power. No verified evidence supports such a claim, yet the persistence of the rumor suggests that the emblem resonated with a deeper mythic significance. Another tradition, darker still, tells of a Templar knight who pledged to marry a noblewoman but left for the Crusades. Upon his return years later, he found she had died. In grief, he exhumed her body and, according to the legend, an otherworldly voice instructed him to take her skull and bones as a token. The bones, arranged in a cross beneath the skull, became a personal talisman, later adopted as a symbol of mortality and undying loyalty among certain Templar circles. Whether true or not, such a tale reveals how medieval minds wove love, death, and mysticism into enduring symbols. From a more pragmatic perspective, the skull and crossbones also served as a stark emblem of mortality in an age when death was ever present. The Templars, sworn to fight and, if necessary, die in service to their cause, would have understood its message intimately, that life is fleeting and that the soul's destiny matters far more than earthly concerns. It could have been a reminder for initiates that every breath was borrowed, every moment an opportunity to serve a higher calling. But why, centuries later, did the skull and crossbones become so firmly linked with piracy? Some researchers suggest that after the suppression of the Templars in 1312, remnants of the order took to the seas, their skills in navigation and warfare repurposed for survival. If any such fugitives carried their symbols with them, the skull and crossbones might have transitioned into maritime use, not as a mere threat, but as a signal of brotherhood among former warriors of the cross. This remains a tantalizing theory, one that blends historical possibility with the romance of outlaw legend. The true origins of the Templar skull and crossbones are clouded by the scarcity of primary sources. The surviving evidence, gravestones in France and Spain, scattered references in later accounts, and the occasional carved motif offers fragments, but not a definitive narrative. The rest has been filled in by centuries of speculation, blending piety with folklore, theology with conspiracy. Could the emblem have carried an esoteric meaning known only to the highest ranks of the order? The Templars have long been linked, rightly or wrongly, to hidden knowledge, mystical traditions, lost relics, and cryptic symbols. In some interpretations, the skull represents not death but transcendence, the triumph of spirit over flesh. The crossbones, forming an X, could signify a meeting point, a crossroads between the mortal and the divine. If this was their intended meaning, then the symbol was not simply a grim reminder, but an encoded message of spiritual transformation. Even in the modern era, the skull and crossbones retains its power to intrigue. It appears in the heraldry of certain Masonic groups, in military insignias, and in the quiet corners of European churches where medieval carvings still endure. Its survival suggests that whatever the Templars intended, the symbol carried a weight that transcended its original context. And so we are left with questions. Was the skull and crossbones a private devotional emblem, a relic marker, a badge of secret brotherhood, or something else entirely? Did it signal a hidden aspect of Templar belief, one that might have unsettled the Church had it been made public? Or was it simply the most direct reminder of all, that every knight, no matter how powerful, would one day stand before the final judgment? Somewhere, perhaps in a forgotten chapel or sealed vault, an unbroken line of Templar artifacts may still exist, objects that could answer these questions with certainty. Until they are found, the skull and crossbones remains both a memento of mortality and an enduring cipher, inviting us to contemplate the unseen truths it may still guard. In the quiet countryside of France, where rolling fields give way to dense forests and winding streams, ancient stones rise from the earth like the bones of a forgotten giant. Some are crumbling walls overgrown with ivy. Others are towers whose arrow slits still watch the landscape as they did centuries ago. These are the remnants of Templar commanderies, fortified estates, farms, and strongholds that once formed the backbone of the Order's vast network across Europe. To the casual traveler, they are picturesque ruins. To the historian, they are pieces of a grand logistical machine. But to those who look closer, they may be the keys to a deeper mystery: the existence of hidden Templar strongholds in France, never officially recorded and perhaps never intended to be found. The Templars' holdings in France were extensive. From Normandy to Provence, from the rugged hills of Auvergne to the fertile plains of Burgundy, their estates served as both economic hubs and defensive bastions. These commanderies, connected by a web of roads and waterways, could provide supplies, safe passage, and armed reinforcements with remarkable speed. Official documents list many of them in detail: land deeds, inventories, and tax records preserved in medieval archives. Yet, scattered among these well-known sites are references to places that no modern survey has conclusively identified. La Maison Forte des Chevaliers, Domus Templi in Silvis, and other vague names hinting at fortresses in remote or inaccessible areas. What purpose could such hidden sites have served? Some historians argue they were simply small outposts, way stations for messengers or livestock pens for distant estates. But others suggest a more strategic function: secret retreats to safeguard people, documents, or treasures in times of crisis. When the Order fell under suspicion in the early 14th century, such places could have been used to hide valuable relics or archives from the reach of King Philip IV's agents. The geography of France offers countless opportunities for concealment. In the mountains of the Massif Central, valleys fold into one another like layered fabric, creating pockets invisible from the main roads. In the Dordogne, limestone cliffs are riddled with natural caves, many of which were modified in the Middle Ages for storage or defense. Along the coasts of Brittany and Normandy, tidal inlets and hidden harbors could have sheltered small ships. Were some of these locations fortified by the Templars, disguised as ordinary farms or chapels, known only to a trusted few? There are stories, part folklore, part local tradition, of villagers stumbling upon unusual structures deep in the woods: arched cellars too finely built for peasant houses, staircases descending into the bedrock, narrow corridors that end abruptly at sealed doors. Some of these accounts have been corroborated by archaeological finds. Others remain unverifiable. In the Chartres region, a farmer reportedly uncovered a subterranean chamber while plowing his field in the late 19th century. Its walls bore carved crosses identical to those seen on Templar tombs, and the space was large enough to store chests or weapons. No formal excavation was ever undertaken, and the chamber was quietly filled in, perhaps to prevent looting. In certain cases, hints of hidden strongholds come from the Templars' own records, cryptic references in letters and charters. One such document, preserved in the archives of Paris, mentions a fortress in the shadow of the oak, without specifying its location. Another lists payments for the transport of materials for the hidden house to a site whose name was deliberately omitted. Were these simply poetic phrases, or deliberate attempts to obscure sensitive information from prying eyes? The idea of hidden strongholds also intertwines with the more speculative theories surrounding the Templars. Some believe that during the suppression of the order in 1307, not all knights were captured. A small number may have retreated to remote refuges, using them as bases to regroup or to transport assets to allies abroad, possibly to Scotland, Portugal, or Cyprus. If these strongholds existed, they would have been constructed or adapted with secrecy in mind. Concealed entrances, disguised buildings, and hidden storage vaults. In certain parts of Languedoc and Poitou, legends connect Templar ruins to underground passages leading miles away from the visible structure. While many of these supposed tunnels are later inventions, or natural caves misinterpreted as man-made, the persistence of the stories raises an interesting point. Secrecy was part of the Templar operational mindset. A hidden route or secure fallback point could mean survival in a hostile landscape. Some researchers have employed modern technology to investigate these possibilities. Ground-penetrating radar, aerial surveys, and LiDAR mapping have revealed anomalies beneath the soil near known Templar sites. Geometric patterns suggestive of walls, moats, or courtyards that have long since been buried. In several cases, these patterns lie far from any documented Templar property, raising the tantalizing possibility of undiscovered commanderies. But evidence remains fragmentary. Many potential sites are on private land, inaccessible to archaeologists without permission. Others are in regions where centuries of farming, war, and construction have erased all traces. And still others may lie beneath modern towns, their stones repurposed into houses, churches, and barns long ago. The silence of the landscape hides as much as it reveals. If such strongholds truly existed, what might they have contained? Were they simple refuges, stocked with supplies and weapons, or did they guard something more precious? Documents, sacred relics, or even the rumored treasures of the Temple Mount brought back from the Holy Land? The lack of conclusive evidence leaves these questions suspended between history and legend. Standing before one of these ruined commanderies today, with its weathered stones glowing gold in the late afternoon light, it is easy to imagine the lives that once passed through its gates. Knights in white mantles bearing the red cross, servants tending the fields, messengers arriving with urgent news. Yet somewhere beyond the reach of recorded history, perhaps deep in the woods or hidden beneath the hills, there may still be other gates, never mapped, never breached, keeping their centuries-old secrets intact. And so the question lingers. How many Templar strongholds still lie undiscovered in the French countryside, and what untold chapters of history might they hold in their silent, shadowed halls? The parchment is small, barely the size of a man's hand, and stained with the marks of centuries. Its edges are frayed, its ink faded to the color of dried blood. It was discovered, according to the story, inside the false back of an antique chest in a crumbling French farmhouse. The script is in medieval Latin, the hand precise yet hurried, as though written by someone with little time to spare. The words are fragmentary, interrupted by smudges and tears, but they are unmistakably urgent. This, some claim, is the last Templar message, a final communication written in the hours or days before the order of the temple was shattered. October 13th, 1307. Across France, the dawn brought with it the sound of boots on cobblestone and the banging of fists on wooden gates. King Philip IV's orders were swift and merciless. All Templars were to be arrested, their property seized, their leaders imprisoned. Within hours, the once proud order found itself trapped in a net of political ambition and papal acquiescence. Yet history records that not all Templars were taken. Some escaped the raids, vanishing into the countryside, their whereabouts and their intentions unknown. Could the last Templar message be a trace of their desperate bid to preserve what they held most dear? The surviving text is cryptic. It speaks of the Ark, the light, and the place where the twin rivers meet. Are these references to specific objects, perhaps relics recovered during the Crusades? Or are they metaphors, meant to disguise the message's true meaning should it fall into enemy hands? Some historians see in the wording an echo of biblical language, suggestive of a sacred mission. Others believe it to be a coded set of instructions, the Twin Rivers, referring to a geographic location, possibly in France, possibly far beyond. Deciphering such a document is no easy task. The Templars were known to use ciphers and symbolic language, especially when communicating sensitive information. A seemingly simple phrase might hold multiple layers of meaning, recognizable only to those initiated into the order's inner circles. This has led some researchers to compare the message's structure to known Templar cipher texts, noting similar patterns of abbreviation and deliberate ambiguity. The chest in which the parchment was found offers its own mysteries. Crafted from oak and bound in iron, it bears a carved cross pate on its lid, weathered but still visible. The style matches Templar artifacts from the late 13th century, though the chest itself has never been conclusively dated. Its false compartment was cleverly concealed, requiring a hidden latch to release the panel. Whoever hid the parchment intended it to stay hidden for a long time. Skeptics point out that the message's provenance is weak. Without definitive proof that it dates from the Templar period, it could be a later forgery, perhaps from the 18th or 19th century, when romanticized tales of the knights captured the European imagination. Yet, forensic analysis of the ink and parchment suggests a medieval origin, placing it, at least tentatively, within the right era. If authentic, the last Templar message forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What was so important that it had to be hidden in such a way? Was it a warning to allies, a set of directions to a hidden refuge, or a spiritual testament meant to be read by future generations when the order could rise again? One interpretation links the message to the sudden disappearance of certain Templar treasures recorded in royal inventories before the arrests. Gold, silver, and valuable manuscripts were expected to be seized, but many were simply gone. Could the Ark refer to a chest of these missing valuables, spirited away under cover of night? Another theory connects the light to a relic, perhaps the famed Holy Grail or a fragment of the True Cross, objects whose supposed presence in Templar custody has long been a matter of speculation. More speculative still is the suggestion that the place where the twin rivers meet refers to a location outside Europe entirely. Some fringe theories propose that a small group of Templars fled by sea, taking their most guarded possessions to distant lands, possibly even to the shores of North America, centuries before Columbus. If so, the message might be the only surviving clue to their intended destination. And yet, the text is incomplete. Whole sections are missing, torn away or erased by time. The gaps may hide vital information, or they may be deliberate. Phrases removed to prevent the uninitiated from understanding the full scope of what was being conveyed. In this, the message mirrors the broader enigma of the Templars themselves, fragments of truth obscured by centuries of silence and myth. Attempts to locate the exact site described in the message have met with frustration. The Twin Rivers could describe dozens of places in France alone, not to mention the rest of Europe. Each candidate location brings with it its own tangle of legends, ruined fortresses, sealed caves, and nameless graves. In some cases, excavations have revealed medieval artifacts, but none conclusively linked to the Templars. What is perhaps most intriguing is the possibility that this was not the only such message. Templar communications often traveled in duplicate or triplicate, sent along different routes to ensure that at least one would reach its intended recipient. If the last Templar message we know of today was just one copy, where might the others be? Buried in private collections? Locked away in church archives? Or still hidden, waiting to be found by someone who knows where to look? Standing in the dim light of an archive room, holding the fragile parchment under glass, one cannot help but feel the weight of the centuries pressing down. The words, though faded, still carry urgency, as if the writer is speaking directly across time, warning, guiding, pleading. And yet, without the missing pieces, we are left to wonder, was this the final voice of a dying order, or a calculated step in a plan that outlived its persecutors? If the truth lies hidden in the folds of this ancient message, it has not yet revealed itself. And so the question remains, what was the last Templar trying to tell us, and will we ever be able to understand it fully? Beneath the shifting light of a late afternoon sun, the old churchyard lies in solemn silence. Weathered headstones lean at odd angles, their inscriptions softened by centuries of wind and rain. Among them are several markers bearing the distinctive cross pate of the Knights Templar, symbols carved deep into stone that has long since lost its sharp edges. Moss clings to their surfaces, obscuring names and dates, but the iconography is unmistakable. These are Templar graves, or so the records claim. Yet, when archaeologists have opened some of them, they have found nothing. No bones, no relics, only empty earth where a body should have been. The first such discovery was made decades ago, in a small village in southern France, a region once rich with Templar commanderies. The grave's surface suggested no disturbance, its stone cover sealed tight. But when it was carefully lifted, the void beneath told a different story. The absence was more than unsettling. It was inexplicable. Medieval burial practices, especially for an order as structured as the Templars, followed rigid conventions. Bodies were interred intact, often with the knight's sword or cross. Why then would a grave be prepared, marked, and left vacant? The mystery deepened as more such sites came to light, not just in France, but in parts of Portugal, England, and Cyprus. In some cases, the soil showed signs of having once held remains, as if a body had been removed long after burial. In others, it appeared the grave had never been used at all, the earth compacted but undisturbed. Each variation raises a different set of questions. Were these cenotaphs, memorials for Templars who died far away, perhaps in the Holy Land? Or do they point to a more secretive practice, one involving the concealment or relocation of remains? Some historians lean toward the practical explanation. The Templars were often engaged in campaigns far from home, and transporting a body across great distances was costly and hazardous. A symbolic grave might have been the only way to honor a fallen knight. Yet even this does not fully account for the meticulous care with which some of these empty graves were crafted, complete with ornate carvings and prime placement within consecrated ground. Others suggest a ritual dimension. Could certain Templars have undergone a special form of burial, known only to the highest ranks of the order? If so, where were their bodies taken, and why? The absence of remains could point to cremation, though medieval Christian doctrine largely forbade it. Alternatively, perhaps the remains were interred in hidden locations, catacombs, secret vaults, or even distant lands, guarded from desecration by enemies. The political climate of the early 14th century adds another layer to the puzzle. When the Templars were arrested in 1307, many of their properties were seized, their symbols destroyed, and their leaders executed. It is not impossible to imagine that surviving brothers might have exhumed the remains of their dead to protect them from royal or ecclesiastical reprisal. Removing a body from consecrated ground was a grave offense, but the Templars had already been branded as heretics. Their priority may have shifted from following church law to preserving their own legacy. There are more speculative theories still. In some versions of the legend, the missing bodies were not reburied at all, but hidden with great treasures or relics, guarding them in death as they had in life. One particularly enduring tale claims that a group of empty graves in western France corresponds to a secret underground passage leading to a sealed chamber. Local folklore speaks of lights seen in the graveyard on certain nights and of whispered chanting that fades into the wind. No excavation has confirmed such claims, but the stories persist, passed down quietly from one generation to the next. Symbolism may also play a role. The empty grave could be a statement, a reminder that the Templars were more than flesh and bone, that their mission and ideals endured beyond physical death. Some scholars have drawn parallels to the empty tomb of Christ, seeing in these graves a deliberate echo of resurrection imagery. Whether this was meant to inspire the faithful, intimidate opponents, or send a coded message to those within the order remains a matter of debate. In Portugal, at the Convent of Christ in Tomar, one of the most important Templar sites to survive their dissolution, there are records of knights whose burial places are documented, but whose actual resting places are unknown. The written accounts are meticulous in naming the individuals and describing their memorials, yet no skeletal remains have been found beneath the stones. Was this simply poor record-keeping? Or does it point to an organized effort to obscure the final fate of certain figures? In recent years, advances in ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis have made it possible to study these empty graves without disturbing them. The findings are curious. In some, the soil composition suggests it was once disturbed, consistent with a later removal of a coffin or remains. In others, the earth appears undisturbed since the grave was dug, implying that it was always empty. This split only complicates matters, as it suggests multiple purposes behind the phenomenon. The question then becomes, who decides which Templars were buried traditionally and which received this unusual treatment? Was it a mark of honor, reserved for leaders or those entrusted with great secrets? Or was it the opposite? A way to erase certain individuals from the historical record without desecrating their names publicly. Standing in one of these churchyards today, the air still and heavy with the scent of lichen and old stone, it is difficult not to feel the weight of the unspoken. Each grave, whether holding a body or nothing at all, represents a life devoted to a cause that ended in fire, betrayal, and mystery. But the empty ones, those carefully prepared resting places that hold only silence, seem to speak the loudest. They tell us that something is missing, not just in the ground beneath our feet, but in our understanding of the past. And so we are left with a question as stark as the stones themselves. Were these Templar graves without bodies acts of necessity, of devotion, or of secrecy? And will we ever uncover the truth they were meant to conceal? The March air over Paris was cold and sharp, carrying with it the acrid scent of burning pitch. On the Ile de la Cité, the square before the great Cathedral of Notre Dame was crowded with onlookers, their murmurs mingling with the crackle of firewood. In the center stood a pyre, and bound to its stake was an old man, stooped, gaunt, yet defiant. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Knights Templar, stared out at the sea of faces, his eyes steady and unwavering despite the flames beginning to lick at his feet. Witnesses say that as the smoke rose, so too did his voice, strong, unwavering, and filled with words that would echo through the centuries. It was March 18th, 1314. For 7 years, de Molay had languished in prison, enduring interrogations, humiliation, and the long shadow of betrayal. Accused of heresy, idolatry, and secret rites, he had publicly recanted his earlier forced confession, knowing it would seal his fate. Now, as the fire was lit, the man who had once commanded one of the most powerful orders in Christendom called upon a higher court of judgment. According to chroniclers of the time, de Molay turned toward King Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V, two men whose alliance had orchestrated the downfall of the Templars and summoned them to meet him before God's throne. Within a year, he declared, both would stand in judgment alongside him. It was a bold, impossible statement, uttered at the very moment of death. Yet history records that Clement died just a month later, and Philip followed before the year was out. Coincidence? Or something more? The so-called Curse of Jacques de Molay became one of the most enduring legends surrounding the Templars. Medieval minds, steeped in a world where divine justice and supernatural intervention were deeply intertwined, saw in these events proof that the Grand Master's words had carried the weight of prophecy, or perhaps vengeance from beyond the grave. His curse, it was said, did not stop with those two men. The Capetian line of French kings, of which Philippe was a part, would meet its ruin within a generation. Indeed, by 1328, the dynasty had ended, replaced by the Valois branch. Historians are quick to note that political instability, disease, and shifting alliances can explain such rapid changes in power. Royal lines often faltered for reasons far more earthly than supernatural curses. Yet the timing remains striking. To those inclined toward belief, de Molay's final words were not merely an act of defiance. They were a judgment carried out in the invisible realm. In later centuries, the legend would take on a life of its own, woven into the fabric of French national memory. Voltaire, writing in the 18th century, referred to the deaths of Philip and Clement as the fulfillment of de Molay's curse, using it as a metaphor for the inevitability of justice. In more romantic retellings, the curse extended even further, supposedly haunting anyone who dared to defile the Templar name or desecrate their secrets. But was there truly a curse, or is this a classic case of history being shaped to fit a compelling narrative? Skeptics point out that the deaths of Philip and Clement, while close together in time, may have been inevitable for unrelated reasons. Both men were already in poor health. The Pope's passing in April 1314 could be attributed to illness, and the king's death in November may have been the result of a hunting accident or stroke. To those unconvinced by the supernatural, the alignment of events is nothing more than coincidence. Remarkable, yes, but explainable without invoking mystical forces. Yet even within the realm of natural explanation, the legend serves another purpose. It captures the drama and moral weight of the Templar downfall, casting de Molay as a figure of almost biblical retribution. The idea of a dying man calling his persecutors to face divine judgment has a universal resonance. It speaks to the hope that, in the end, justice will prevail, even if it must be delivered from beyond the veil of death. More speculative voices have suggested that de Molay's so-called curse may have been rooted in something other than divine wrath. Could it have been a veiled threat, implying that the Templars, though scattered, still possessed influence, allies, and secrets capable of striking back at their enemies? If so, the subsequent deaths of Philip and Clement might not have been acts of heaven, but of human design. However, no evidence has ever emerged to suggest such an organized retaliation, leaving the idea firmly in the realm of conjecture. There are also those who interpret the curse symbolically. In this view, de Molay's words were less about literal death and more about the collapse of legitimacy. By predicting their summons before God, he was, in effect, declaring that their moral authority would be stripped away. Indeed, both Philip and Clement left behind tarnished legacies, their reputations forever stained by their roles in the destruction of the Templars. Standing today on the spot where de Molay met his fate, marked by a small plaque near the Pont Neuf, one can almost feel the weight of that moment. The city moves on, indifferent to the centuries, but the story remains. The crackle of imagined flames, the defiant voice rising above them, and the chilling precision of the prophecy all linger in the mind. Was this the final act of a wronged man invoking divine justice? Or was it the shrewd last gesture of a leader ensuring that his enemies' names would forever be entwined with infamy? And so the question endures, unanswered. Was the curse of Jacques de Molay the work of fate, of faith, or of fiction? And, if it was real, does it still echo in the shadows of history? In the heart of the French countryside, rising above the rooftops of a quiet medieval town, stands the Chartres Cathedral, a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, its twin spires piercing the sky like silent sentinels. Approaching from the surrounding plains, the structure appears almost otherworldly, its gray limestone shifting in hue with the changing light. The facade is adorned with a tapestry of intricate carvings, saints, angels, grotesques, each figure seeming to watch as if privy to a secret too ancient to be spoken aloud. Stepping inside, the transition is immediate. The cool air carries the faint scent of stone and incense, and the silence feels deliberate, as though the building itself is listening. Sunlight filters through stained glass windows of impossible beauty, casting jewel-toned patterns on the floor. Here, the famous blue of Chartres glows with a depth no modern artisan has been able to replicate, the cobalt tones rich and seemingly alive. Beneath the towering vaults, light and shadow merge into a language of their own. Chartres Cathedral is revered not only for its architectural perfection, but also for the mysteries it holds. Mysteries that some believe connect it to the Knights Templar. Construction began in the late 12th century, during the height of Templar influence in Europe, and was completed in an astonishingly short time for a structure of such complexity. This has led some historians to wonder, did the Templars have a hand in its creation? One of the most curious features lies beneath the cathedral, a labyrinth carved into the stone floor. Its circular design, measuring over 40 feet in diameter, has long been interpreted as a symbolic pilgrimage, a spiritual journey in miniature for those unable to travel to holy sites. Yet others have suggested it might conceal deeper meaning, possibly even a Templar cipher, a code hidden in plain sight. Could the pattern represent a map, a cosmological diagram, or a pathway to knowledge lost with the fall of the order? The cathedral also houses a relic of immense importance, the Sancta Camisia, believed to be the tunic worn by the Virgin Mary at the time of Christ's birth. How this sacred artifact arrived in Chartres is a matter of record. It was a gift from King Charles the Bald in the 9th century, but its preservation through wars, fires, and centuries of upheaval borders on miraculous. Some accounts claim that the Templars, with their vast network and reputation as protectors of holy relics, may have been instrumental in safeguarding it. More enigmatic still are the cathedral's sculptures and stained glass narratives. In certain panels, scholars have noted depictions that appear to diverge from orthodox biblical interpretation, images hinting at esoteric teachings, astronomical alignments, and even symbols more commonly associated with pre-Christian traditions. Among these, some claim to see Templar cross forms subtly integrated into the artwork, their meaning obscured by the passage of time. Could these be the remnants of a visual language known only to initiates? The question deepens when one considers the cathedral's orientation. Chartres is aligned not only with the cardinal points but also, according to some researchers, with specific astronomical events. The angle of light on certain days of the year seems to fall precisely upon designated spots within the cathedral, such as the labyrinth or key columns. Was this intentional? If so, who possessed the knowledge to design such a system in the 12th century, and why? Mainstream historians argue that these alignments and symbols are the product of medieval Christian artistry, influenced by the blending of religious and cultural knowledge that was common in cathedral building. The Templars, though powerful, may have had no direct role. After all, their main purpose was military and financial, not architectural. But this explanation leaves unanswered the uncanny precision of the cathedral's design, the persistence of certain motifs, and the whispers of shared Templar and cathedral lore in regional tradition. More speculative theories suggest that Chartres was more than a place of worship. It was a repository of knowledge. Some believe the cathedral encodes sacred geometry, representing a synthesis of spiritual and mathematical truths possibly derived from ancient sources, including those encountered by the Templars during their time in Palestine. Could the cathedral be, in essence, a stone manuscript? Its every proportion, carving, and shaft of light part of a deliberate message? Others point to the very location of Chartres. Long before the cathedral stood here, the site was a place of pagan worship. According to legend, Druids once venerated a virgin who will bear a child in a sacred grove on this hill, centuries before the Christian era. The blending of pre-Christian and Christian symbolism within the cathedral could be interpreted as a deliberate merging of traditions, perhaps reflecting the Templars' rumored interest in reconciling different spiritual paths. The absence of definitive records fuels the intrigue. While cathedral archives are rich with documents on repairs, donations, and local history, they remain silent on the deeper reasoning behind certain design choices. If there were connections to the Templars, they may have been intentionally left unrecorded, or hidden within coded references decipherable only to a select few. Standing in the nave, gazing down the labyrinth toward the distant altar, one feels a strange pull, as though the cathedral invites not just admiration but participation in a silent dialogue. The light streaming through the blue of Chartres seems almost to vibrate, as if carrying a message in color rather than words. Is it possible that, centuries later, we are still only seeing the surface of what the builders intended? If the Templars left their mark here, it is not in the form of open declarations, but in whispers of stone and glass, a puzzle whose pieces are scattered across history. Were they merely protectors of relics and pilgrims, or also guardians of a hidden legacy encoded in one of the greatest cathedrals ever built? And if so, what truths might still be waiting quietly within its walls for those who know how to look?